Jay, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. It's really been looking forward to having you on here. Before we start, I wanted to say I was going through your YouTube channel and what you do with the podcast there. Such quality content. So anybody all my viewers that are watching this right now, make sure to go down to the description and check out Jay's channel because just really good interviews. And the crazy thing is, Jay, you don't need to be doing this right now. You just keep going because you have this in you to keep moving forward. And so it's to see somebody doing that is inspiring. Jay sold his company for $33 million a little while back, Yashi, and the reason that's why I'm so inspired by you is you just keep moving forward. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what was the day after you sold the company? How did that feel like to you?
I took the company to Atlantic City. So the hotels, limousines and money, like let's go gamble. And we just had fun, it was a long time coming, right? Like I had a business that was worth a lot of money before that. And that company got sued and we went bankrupt. And then I started another company and I had some prolific angel investors in that business and we ran out of capital and we just didn't get refunded. And then I started Gamers Media, which became Yashi, and, grew it. It was a grind. I think, as I've told you offline, to me, that was like the low hanging fruit. Like I knew that we would make money just running it, like just cash flow, right? I treated Yashi like a laundromat. I took my quarters out every month, right? So whatever the profits were, I was just bonusing it out all the time. And so we did really well. Regardless, I didn't need an exit. I was going to make money running that type of business. That's the kind of business that you're not going to sell. Potentially you could, but most likely you're not going to sell for billions of dollars. That wasn't the play. The play was to build a sustainable, repeatable model that is cash flow generative and very profitable. And that's what we did. And then when I sold it, it was just what I needed to do at that time. My kids were getting a little older at that point. I was burnt out because I had a long run at what I did previously and a couple things didn't work out. And I just wanted to get a win under my belt just financially and then have that security for my family. And so that's what we did. So the day after though, it was exciting, I'll say. But it's not like, when you sell a company, a lot of people always say like, what did it feel like? It's like, well, first of all, we were already millionaires when we sold. So that wasn't like, oh, we finally got our million. A lot of tech founders, they make like, I don't know, 100 grand or 75 grand a year, something like that. And all the money goes back in the business and all the VC funding goes to growth. And when they sell, they liquidate their shares and they finally become millionaires. And that wasn't the case for us. We already had accumulated wealth just running the businesses and stuff. And investing and stuff like that. So there wasn't like this big windfall that made us wealthy. It made us a lot more wealthy. I'm not going to say that, but it wasn't like this moment, where like you scratch off a lottery ticket or something. And also it doesn't just happen, right? Like when you're selling a company, you have an investment bank involved and you're negotiating contracts for months and it becomes very clear that it's going to happen. You're not telling your parents and stuff like that. So like, the day it happened, it was cool to like, I told my mom it's likely going to happen, but we don't know. And there's been other acquisitions that we've gone down the road on too. So I didn't want to get anybody's hopes up, including the employees and investors. But at some point the investors come in and you send the docs and everybody signs the docs. And it comes back and it's definitely going to happen. One funny story about the transaction I'll tell you is that we closed on a Friday. I think it was a Friday, but we closed and we couldn't complete the they didn't send the wire transfer to everybody right away. So this was crazy, dude. Right. So like, and I was by far the largest shareholder. Right. And so like, we're waiting on this money to come in and then the money's not coming in. And then we missed the 2 p.m. Eastern time cutoff and I'm freaking out. I'm like, what if the money doesn't come in? What if they renege on this? I want the damn money in the bank account now, and I'm calling everybody. And then like the next day, like one investor sends me a text. I got the wire. I'm like, oh, thank God. Right. And then everybody got their wire except for me. It's like and I was by far like the largest. And I'm like, where the fuck is the money? And they screwed something up and then they give us the Fed fund number and they eventually got it to me though. The point is it obviously eventually came, but I was like freaking out,
Oh man.
But it's not a surprise, it's coming. So it's not like that. You know what I mean? So yeah.
That's awesome. I can only imagine what it's like when it finally hits. Because it's funny in the collectibles business, we're always like, "Oh, please God, will the wire just land already? The wire!" And it's like that was actually what got me so interested in Bitcoin is when I saw it actually moving. I'm like, wait a minute, people don't actually play with this. People that are critical of Bitcoin haven't actually played with it themselves. I've noticed that. Like you get the Peter Schiffs, you get all these guys out there, but they haven't really sent it from one place to another and been like, oh, that's what a soft confirmation's like. So they might say it takes a long time for a Bitcoin to move, but it's like, no, you don't understand that you get an immediate soft confirmation and it's pending. and you can
Yeah.
literally spend it, and then it will be pending to the next person, and you see it's just pending on the blockchain. So it's like when I saw that, I'm like, this is like if wire transfers were a bicycle, this is like a jet airliner, or a Learjet. It's just completely different, and it's absolutely better than the one node system that we're used to of the Fed wire system. It's not even close. So it's funny that you say that. I didn't expect for you to talk to have that kind of same feeling that I feel on a daily basis, pretty much. Of just, please God, will the
I
wire
gotta
land
say
is.
too, Rob, I gotta just take a step back. You have a cool setup, man. Like I thought my setup's pretty neat, but like where do you get, is that wallpaper or something? What are all those things behind you? All the blue colors, and it's really cool.
I have major ADD or ADHD or whatever it is that they dropped me on my head when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure they dropped maybe a few times. So it's like everything has to be a certain way or something. And so like for me, it's like I'm a big fan of Nikola Tesla, like the actual Nikola Tesla. So I have him there, and then this is the Monkeys of Parliament, because it's kind of like reminds me of what's going on today, just being ran by complete chimps. And then I like my crystals. I got a little levitating light bulb, and then the background stuff is just like some paneling and stuff that I put in here. And this
Oh,
is
cool.
like,
Okay.
I read a book. I forget where I read this, but it's like every man needs to have a certain type of like cave, like something where it's your sanctuary, your zone where nobody else is allowed.
That's
It's
what
just
this
yours.
is.
So exactly. So you know what I'm talking about. So this is like my little. I call it the war room. I have like a huge whiteboard over there with all soundboarded and all these. Like it just looks badass in here. And some people won't even see what it looks like inside of here, but I made it a certain way just so it inspires me when I come in this room. So I
It's a good
appreciate that,
look. I
man.
like it. Yeah.
Thanks, bro. Um, the next thing I wanted to get towards is like, when was the first? Because you're a purebred entrepreneur. After talking with you on the phone, talking with you on the air, and even off air, I can tell that it's just in your blood to be an entrepreneur. There's no way that someone's going to call you a boss in your life, or you're going to call somebody else a boss. Like, there's no way that's going to happen. I can just tell it was in your DNA. Like, when did you realize that? At what age, and like, what was the first little entrepreneurial venture that you had that you realized, like, hey, I'm
Oh
an
man, I
entrepreneur?
mean, entrepreneurial venture. Like when I was a kid, my grandmother used to bring me to Woolworths, if you remember that place, and used to buy lollipops. You'd get them. I forget the price, but it was like $1. You get $1. You pay $1 and you got a whole bunch of lollipops. I forget how many. And I used to sell them for a quarter a piece on the playground. And the reason I did that is I used to go and I used to have like the fanny pack. So I come to school with all these lollipops and I'd be exchanging it. But what happens is people would go to pay for their lunch with like a $2 bill, and it cost $1.75. So everybody was left at a quarter at the end. So I used to go on the playground right after we go to recess right outside, and I would have everybody run up to me. That was like the drug dealer, right? Selling them sugar, and it's like, give me your quarter. And I got in trouble like I don't know, a couple months in, like I had like a bunch of money in my, like, you flipped your desk up and there was like all these dollars and quarters and all this shit. And so I was very entrepreneurial from an early age. I always did stuff like that. I would just buy, sell things, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because we didn't have a lot of money and I just was focused on money for some reason. I don't know.
Man, that cracks me up. When I was a kid, I played roller hockey and ice hockey when I was a kid, and I remember going door to door on rollerblades trying to like sell stuff for the school. Like they had us doing those little fundraisers where like, oh, sell this
Yeah.
for the holidays and make us all this money, and we'll give you maybe a candy for in return or something. And it's like, wait a minute, these prizes are bunk. Like I just made you guys like 10 grand, and you gave me this BS prize right here. What the hell is this? And I remember going to Costco, and I was with my mom when I was like 9 or 10 or something, and I'm like, I want that, and that. I'll buy it all myself. Like I have $50. Like I'm gonna buy all those candies. And I went door to door and sold the candies myself, and saved up my first little nest egg of money when I was a kid as well. It's funny. Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you. It's like it seems that it's. Do you think being an entrepreneur is just in your blood? Do you think it's something that you just were born with, or do you think it's your environment that makes you that
It's
way?
environment. I think it's environment. So when I knew I didn't want to work for anybody was probably 1990. By 1990 we had a recession in the United States, and my stepfather was a carpenter and he was out of work for 1 year. So he was home almost all year. And my mom, she cleaned houses for cash. So she, they didn't have very like high education or anything like that. High school, it was the furthest they went. Um, so the opportunities were not there. I didn't know that as a kid, but but as you get older, you kind of figure that kind of stuff out. And so I remember seeing my other cousin's father, my uncle John. He was a police officer, and so he was still working. Like, when things are getting tough, you don't lay cops off, right? And they have like tenure and all this kind of stuff too, which I didn't fully understand at that point or appreciate, but I got it later. I just knew that I at that time I was like I didn't want to. I wanted to work for myself, right? So I just thought to myself, if I had my own job or my own business of some sort, I would have a lot of bosses because they're all your customers essentially, right? And you're not going to lose them all at once. You can't lose them all at once, right? If you have like 50 or 100 or 200 customers. And I saw all my friends' parents that were like entrepreneurs. Like my dad was a union carpenter, and then I had friends that had their dads like own their own construction companies. And so while times were tough, it wasn't zero. You know what I mean? And you know, my dad was he was on unemployment and stuff like that, but that's just not enough, you know. So like I heard my parents like talking about bills and stuff, you know, at that time, and I'd be sitting there playing Nintendo or something in the other room, and they're just like, you know, do we pay this bill or that bill, you know? And it's like arguing and kind of debating, so to speak, like over what bills to pay. That was stressful, you know, as a little kid, you know, and you know, now that I'm older and I have kids, I try to be cognizant of what we talk about in front of the kids, or we talk about that they can overhear us in the other room, because it does create kind of anxiety for kids, and you don't even think it does because you think they don't know what you're talking about. But you know, I was in middle school. I kind of had a general understanding that things were tough. You know, I didn't fully understand what you're talking about. I think that created a little bit of grit in me. I just didn't want to have that kind of scenario for me and my future family. And so I didn't decide to be an entrepreneur at that time. I actually wanted to be a cop for a long time, you know, because I wanted to be like, I wanted to be like my uncle because I just seemed like it was secure, right? But that path didn't work out. I didn't go down that path. I ended up becoming an entrepreneur right after college because while I was in college, even in high school, I started building websites. I had websites built in high school, did it in college. And then afterwards, I started doing that. I was doing e-commerce and just a variety of different things. I wrote a book at one point, my own self-published book, and I sold like 5,000 copies through internet marketing strategies that I learned from a guy named Corey Rudel. I read his books and learned a lot of stuff early on from him. But yeah, it's just like the entrepreneurial bug just kind of hit me probably in college, you know, and then right afterwards I had a job. I have one job out of college. I worked for CDW, the IT sales company. And you know, that lasted for maybe a year while I was doing my internet stuff on the side at my desk, by the way. And they tapped me on the shoulder one day and they're like, you gotta go. You're not doing anything. And they're like, the guy's like, why are you even here? Because they knew everybody in the company kind of knew what I was doing. Like it was widely known. And I was like, well, I'm here for the benefits, you know, for the health insurance. And he's like, bro, you're like 21 years old. Health insurance is like $150 a month, bro. And I was like, my mom said it's really expensive. It's only $150. Like, I thought it was like thousands. And I had no idea. I was an idiot. And that was it. The only job I ever had. And then, like you said, I'll never work for anybody ever again. I mean, at this point. And even if I didn't have a lot of money, I wouldn't, you know, like I would just figure it out. You know, there's always got to be something you can go out and do and figure it out, in my opinion.
So what was the first like real serious venture, right? When you finally left that, what's the first serious venture you did? You're like 21, 22, you started in your 20s. What was that?
The
That
first
starting
thing I
point?
built that really was meaningful was a thing called Rate or Date. Okay, rateordate.com. And it was a dating website, kind of like Hot or Not. And I'm actually friends with the founder of Hot or Not, James Hong. And I basically copied it. And I think he had this page at the bottom, and you'd go down to the bottom of Hot or Not, and it was like copycat sites. And he had me listed up there with one of the sites. There's a whole bunch of those types of sites. But you know, imitation is a form of flattery, I guess, you know? And so like, I saw what he was doing and I just was like, oh, I'll copy that. You know, I didn't understand anything about differentiation. I was just so young, right? I was like 21, 22 years old, whatever it was. Creative Rate or Day. I had a slight twist on what I thought I was doing. I thought I was a little different, but he had something also. It's called Meet Me. I thought I was the first one to do it, but I learned later that he actually had a paid section as well. I didn't have it paid. I had free. So that was a kind of a differentiator, I guess, in some ways. I sold that to MatchNet PLC, which is now called Spark Networks. And that was in 2003, I think. And then I created a social network, which was called Social Tree. And that was right before Zuckerberg created Facebook, actually. It was in early 2004. And then built that. And then we were competing with like Friendster, if you remember Friendster. And then MySpace came out of nowhere. And then they started scaling. And one of the things that they did really, really well is that they had allowed people to change the CSS, the colors and the text and all that kind of stuff, and embed things onto the page. And so we were like, well, they're doing that, we should do that. So then I copied that. And what happened was a user figured out a way to put a music video on the page. And I looked at that and I said, that's interesting. So I created a directory of every music video ever created. And that was called Music Video Codes. And if you were on MySpace in 2005, there's about a 95% chance if you saw a music video code, it came from us. So that was pretty cool. That scaled. And then people kept emailing and asking us, can I upload a video of me skateboarding or some shit? You know, it was like all these people kept asking about it. It was really weird that skateboarding was like one of the first really viral things on online video sharing. Nobody knows this. I do because I had the largest video sharing site at the time. It was like the most popular thing at that time. And then it was like cats running into fans and stupid shit like that. The dance guy, Dance Revolution, like all these things were like the things that were taking off in the beginning.
That
Now we
takes me
have content
back.
like yours. It's crazy, right? Like now you have like real content. And like back in the mid 2000s, it was like I could never imagine a world where people would sit down and stare at their computer screen, or certainly this wasn't even around yet, right? So like iPhone wasn't there yet. I just never imagined a world in which it would evolve into where it is now. I did think that there would be a video sharing site that would be the largest video sharing site, and it would have all of the videos ever created in the entire world, and everybody would come. That was my vision of it when I started to create it. Originally, I stumbled upon the idea, and then was nudged by the users. Can you let me upload? Can you upload? And I'm like, how would I do that? Because I didn't know how to even do that, right? And so one kid says, hey, look at this. There's a site called Vimeo. These are the guys from College Humor. And he goes, check out Vimeo, but they don't let me take the video and put it somewhere else like you do with music video codes. Can you let us upload the video to music video codes and give us the code? I was like, obviously, let's do that. So like there's a need. People want to do it. So we created a thing called MyVeo, MYVEO. And that was the first video sharing site that allowed an embed code. And so we later changed the name, and then I later sold that to this company in New York City, and kind of the rest is history. Like everything's an evolution. And I said this on Hack the Entrepreneur years ago, which is a different audio podcast. And I said, I believe that everything is iterative, right? It's like an iteration. It's just an evolution from one thing to the next. In fact, there's just really nothing new. If you think about Twitter, it's like your buddy away message back in the day on AIM, Like everything is just some kind of a form of, it's just like a slight nuance difference, right? And that slight nuance can be a huge, huge differentiator. When YouTube did what they did, they started off, believe it or not, like video dating. And they pivoted and did what we were doing. And they just did it better. They out executed me, right? It sucks to say that I had the first video sharing site that allows embed codes, and I'm not the YouTube that ended up becoming YouTube, right? But at the end of the day, Chad, Steve, and John, they actually out executed me, and I give them all the credit in the world for that. But I was first, so they should give me some credit too. So it is what it is.
That's a great segue into what I want to talk to. Well, it's still the same topic, but to bring this up is, would you say that was the largest struggle, kind of facing that you had YouTube before YouTube was YouTube, but then you kept carrying on after something kind of fell out with that. This was Bolt, or this was prior to Bolt? What was the name of the video sharing that you did?
Coincidentally, it's funny, it's confusing when people hear the story, but it was, we started off as music video codes, and then I started a sister site called MyVeo. I changed the name because I went on pool.com, and there was a domain. I was looking for a better name than MyVeo because people were trying to type in my video and they were screwing up the name. So it was not phonetical. It was not a very good name. And it's 3 syllables, MyVeo. I did some research on this. The best internet brands are 2 syllables, short, phonetical, 5 characters or less if you can. That was the best way, right? So I went on pool.com and I found this domain name, Yashi.com. And so I literally named MyVeo Yashi.com. This is confusing because years later I started a company called Yashi, which has nothing to do with this, right? So I sold to Bolt and became a partner. I did an equity transaction. I sold to them, and they bought music video codes, and they bought Yashi. Yashi was the video sharing site. That was literally the first video sharing site with embed code, was Yashi. When I sold that to Bolt, we sunset the brands, we merged the traffic in, we revamped their website to be a video sharing site, and that's what Bolt.com became. So when we got sued by Universal Music and we went bankrupt, we actually didn't even go bankrupt. We did a thing called an assignment for the benefit of creditors. It's not technically a bankruptcy. So we technically didn't file bankruptcy, but we sold off the assets and paid all our creditors, which one of them happened to obviously be Universal Music. And that was in 2007, late 2007. And then I went back to the trustee like a few years later, like 2009 or 10. And I was like running Gamers Media, which was my ad network for casual games and everything. And I said, I want to go beyond just games. And I bought the domain name Yashi back from the bankruptcy trustee. So I had 2 companies named Yashi, actually. So what are the chances, right? So it was a little confusing, and a lot of people don't know that story, but that's how it happened. So Yashi was really the first video sharing site that had environmental embed codes, which was originally called MyVeo.
And that's it's such a cool story because for you to go back, you know, I really like that name. Damn it, you
I
know, I
love that
want
name.
that. And I'm not just giving this as a compliment. It really does roll off the tongue easy. It's like something you remember too, Yashi, and it's easy to know how that spells just by hearing it. Like you can, it's something that you just, especially getting the .com. I know from firsthand experience how expensive it is to get the .com. You know, and that was I
I
had a
didn't spend a lot of money
terrible
on it though.
process.
I think it was like $5,000 or $10,000. It wasn't crazy. It was things were different back in 2005 and stuff, you know. So, but it was I got it for like $5,000 I think on Pool.com, and then I bought it back from the bankruptcy for like not a lot because the one guy that bought all the assets from the bankruptcy that were remaining was a guy named Lou Kerner, and Lou Kerner was one of the founders of Bolt, and he just bought it all back from almost like a sentimental thing. Like he was like buying all the domains, and he also owned a bunch of domains at the time. He owned like 35,000 domain names. He had like rebates.com, like all these domains. So I looked and I said, I went to the bankruptcy trustee and I said, it looks like you have Yashi and I want to buy it. So I didn't technically buy it from him. He says, actually, Lou bought it. He's like, just call Lou. So I called Lou and I was like, you got to sell me my fucking domain name. That's my name. And he was like, whatever. What did I pay for? Just give me what I paid for, you know? And it wasn't a lot. It was a couple $1,000, something like that. So, and then he later invested $1.5 million in the Yashi. So, so we did all right.
That's awesome. So would you say it was like one of the, because you kind of, when I hear that term fail forward, you know, that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs really understand, is that meaning of just every time you fail, you can fail and fall back and give up. And that's what most people do. But a real entrepreneur, they fail and they learn from it and they move forward with it. So I think it was like, I forget where I heard that saying from, but fail forward. I always think about that all the time. Whenever I get hit in the face with something, I go, man, got to fail forward. Got to keep moving forward with this. To have something that was literally on the forefront of possibly being the next YouTube, before YouTube was even a thing, prior to 2007, you had this. How do you get hit by Universal Music Group, go bankrupt with Bolt, you lose everything there? Tell me what it's like to go, you know what? I'm not done. I'm not giving up.
Yeah.
I'm moving forward, because this is prior to you selling your company for $33 million later on. Like, bring me back to that point and like what it took to pull that strength out of you.
I'm going to show you something and then I'll tell you that. So I literally just, I'm friends with American Idol, right? And we argue a bunch about failure. He thinks that you don't need to fail, right? He's like, failure doesn't have to be, you know, because we celebrate failure in the tech world, and he thinks it's unnecessary and it's shameful and it's a waste of capital and all this kind of stuff. But can you see this?
It's
Is it zooming in? Is it
focusing.
focusing? I'm not sure if it's going to focus properly.
Maybe you pull
If
back just a
not,
little bit.
yeah, that sucks. It's not going to work, but I'll send it to you. Right.
Yeah.
So what it is, you know, if it's a matrix, right? So it says failures, successes, many attempts, no attempts. So the no attempts crossing to the successes, it's not applicable, right? Because if you don't attempt to, you can't succeed, right? So don't try, don't succeed, right? Um, no attempts and you fail, you didn't succeed, you failure, right? Many attempts and failures, or many attempts and successes, and they have like these like scratch offs, like, you know, tallying it up and stuff. At the end of the day, man, if you don't try, you can't succeed, right? I know it sounds silly and it's obvious, you know. To me, I just believed in myself, and I was an athlete in high school and stuff. So I just thought, you know, growing up, I was an athlete. So to me, it was like failure is not an option. It's like there was a reason why those things happen. It's bad luck. You could have good luck in life and you could have bad luck in life. It doesn't mean you always have bad luck or you always have good luck. There's just luck at times, just bad, you know, things just happen, you know, and we just happen to be really unlucky. Universal Music sued us. I mean, they sued Napster, us, MySpace, and Sony. Like, fuck, you know, if anything, it was a badge of honor in a way. It kind of validated that what we were doing was, you know, obviously interesting enough and scaled enough that they needed to, they were fearful, right? They sued us because we were a threat, you know? And I was like, you know what? I'd take that as a badge of honor. I'm cool with that. And so I just got back on the horse and I started another one, right? Got back on the saddle and just did another one. And then when that didn't work out, I also chalked that up to just bad timing, right? Like the WikiU idea was a great idea. I still think somebody's going to execute on that idea at some point. I would probably invest in somebody that had that idea, was the right team. I think the time is right for it. I know how you can do that today. But we tried to do that, and I don't want to get into the details on that, but we tried to do that in 2006 and it just didn't work because it just wasn't the right timing for it. Right. And I knew that that's why it didn't work, Rob. It wasn't that I was the wrong entrepreneur for it. It wasn't that I didn't have the right ideas or didn't have the capabilities or any of that kind of stuff. Right. I also, along the journey, like met all these different people that were very inspiring in my life. Naval Ravikant became a friend, Reid Hoffman, Max Levchin, James Hong, like the list goes on and on and on. Raj Chamath. I was very inspired by the people I was being surrounded with. I just was lucky enough that we talked about luck before, right? I just feel like I've had a lot of luck, white man born America in the Northeast near New York City. I happened to sell to Bolt, which is like an hour north of where I grew up. And it's like the epicenter. It's like the Silicon Alley, there's the Silicon Valley, there's the Silicon Alley. And I just happen to be lucky. Like, what if I was born in like Kansas or Kenya? And like none of these opportunities would be presented to me at all. Right. And so I felt really lucky that I was in the right place at the right time in life. And for whatever reason, all these confluence of events and experiences and stuff led me to seeing a pattern recognition of the things I did. And it kind of led me to the ideas. And then I just surrounded myself with the right people. And I just didn't, why would I quit on that? Like, I had access to incredible people and I was learning incredible things, and why not keep trying? So to me, it just wasn't even an option. It just didn't make any sense. What was I going to do? Quit and go work at like a retail shop or something? Like, what was I going to do? Right. So like, this is what I do.
It's awesome. Well, you're very humble too to say that, a lot of this came down to luck and everything, because it's like, it's in you're programmed a certain way where, Jay, like it's in your DNA to go keep moving forward. But some people at that moment, or most people, 9.9 out of 10 people at that moment would go, you know what? I'm going to go work a day job. I'm done. I'm done trying. This just ended me. I put all this time and effort into this. I finally got acquired by this big company, and then this all fails on my head. And they have this loser mentality where they give up and they say, that's enough. I can't take it anymore. And they go, and there's like this, it's like a meme or a little JPEG thing where it's like there's this, like a miner that's about to hit it rich and about to hit this big pile of diamonds, and then he turns away and goes, "Oh, I'm done." But he's like just inches away from the next big thing, and so you were the person that just kept going instead of turning back around and actually hit that mine, the diamond mine right there. And so, yeah, it's just
and I'll say,
inspiring.
like, it wasn't always about the money. I wanted to do really cool stuff. Like, one of the things I think was really amazing and I'm proud of is that, we built businesses that reached hundreds of millions of people for the social media businesses. And then the ad tech business reached like billions of people, right? Like, we were showing video ads all over the world, so like, that's really cool. Like, my dad would go build a building, and I remember driving by and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I built that building like 10 years ago." Like, me and these guys in this, I was on that job, and he was proud of that, and he should be. And I was proud of what I did, and I think I should have been, and so that was cool. And it just turns out that the more people you impact in life, the more money you're going to make, right? Like, it's just the way it works. And for whatever, however that is, like, I was able to create things that scaled to hundreds of millions of people. If you're successful at that, you can make a lot of money.
It's awesome. So when you're recollecting yourself, was Yashi the next thing right after that, or what was the next thing right after that bankruptcy hit and Universal sued? What's the next project right after that where you picked yourself back up?
It was WikiU. So what happened was, Raj Kapoor, we were in New York City, right? So we were on Hudson and Spring Street, in Soho, our office. And people usually just stop by. Like, Mark Pincus stopped by the office, Raj Kapoor, the founder of Snapchat. Like, all these people would just like ping us and be like, "Oh, I'm in the city next week," or, "You guys are gonna be around? We'd love to stop by." Why would they ping us? Well, we were like the second largest video sharing site to YouTube. So we were relevant at that time. And so people would always ping to see what's going on. Raj happened to ping us one time. So this is one of the meetings that we've had, many of the meetings, but one of the meetings, he says, "I'm going to be in the city. Do you mind if we stop by the office?" And at that time, he was previously the founder of Snapfish. His investor was the Mayfield Fund. And when he sold Snapfish for like $300 million, he went back to his VCs and they offered to have him become a managing director. Rogers is a really smart, intelligent guy and very likable. And he was a great person to be a VC, highly networked, all this kind of stuff. And wanted to stop by the office. And I said, "Sure. What's the meeting about?" He's like, "I have a portfolio company called Tagged. I think it's If We Now or We If or something like that, but it's Tagged, Tagged. He's like, and would love to just stop by, and maybe there's a channel partnership or who knows. I don't know. Just let's talk." "Yeah, sure. Stop by. We got nothing to do on that day. Just come over at 1:00 or so." Comes over, and this is when we were dealing with the lawsuit at that point, and he knew about the lawsuit. And he's like, "We might have a soft landing for you guys. Like, maybe we can merge the companies together." And I said, "All right, well, I'm always open for any idea, So we flew out and met with Greg and John, the founders of Tagged. It was me and Aaron. And, quickly we realized there's probably not a there for a merger. We fly back like the next day. Raj is still in the city, stops by the office again and says, how did it go? And I was like, I don't think it went so well. And he's like, yeah, I kind of got the sense of talking to Greg and that. And he's like, well, that sucks. He's like, I really like you guys. I'd like to be able to do something. And Aaron's like, he whispers in my ear, like, tell him about your other idea. And I'm like, okay. He's like, I go, Aaron wants me to tell you about this other idea I have. He goes, sure, what is it? And I was like, okay, if MySpace is an autobiography, then this website would be your unauthorized biography. And he was like, it's interesting. And I was like, it's a biography of every human on earth. He goes, how did you come up with that idea? Like, why do you want to do that? I was like, well, my name is Jay Gould. And when my mom goes to Google and types in Jay Gould, she sees a black and white photo of a railroad baron responsible for trying to corner the market on gold. I don't think that's who she's looking for, Raj. I think Google's failing at people search. And by the way, they're still failing at people search. My mom types it in, she still sees the same results, right? They do a terrible job because they don't know your social graph. And I said, if we can figure out a way to create Wikipedia for people, this could be huge. And he's like, can't Wikipedia just do that? And I was like, I don't know, but I type it in and I'm not there. I mean, I'm there now, but I wasn't then. And so it was funny. So like he says, because Raj knew everybody, he's like, why don't you fly out and meet with Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia? And I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do it. So we fly out to the Wikia office, which is the company he owns. His CEO is a guy named Gould Ventures at the time. We fly out, we tell him about it. I said to him, I go, is this something that Wikipedia is going to do? If we started this website, like, and built this, we haven't done anything yet. Literally, we didn't build anything. Raj is like just connecting the dots and seeing that there's a there for this idea. And at the same time, we're running Bolt, right? And I'm like, what do you think? And so they told Gil and him, were like, we can't tell you what they're going to do on Wikipedia because we don't control Wikipedia. Like Bitcoin, it's decentralized, right? Like there's nobody control. It's like, it's a consensus view, right? And he's like, but based off of the way it works right now, you have to be notable. And I said, yes, that's how I understood it. And that's why I think there's an opportunity here, because they don't put Wikipedia profiles up of my mom because, like, how do they verify the information is accurate? They can't. They have to source the information from articles and things like that, right? And if you can cite and source the information, then they can quote the information as biography about you from the notable things that you've done. I said, but that's a shame, because here we are in a world of a digital age where everything is completely ability to save everything, right, in a database, but you're not saving anything about my mom. So my great grandchildren won't know anything about my mom, like, or anybody else that hasn't had articles written about them. Like, and if it is, it's only the thing that was written about them. Like, oh, they were at the Halloween parade in 1994. It's like, that's not a Wikipedia page to say that she was there once, because it was like in the article with a photo of her. I was like, that, you know what I mean? Like, what about the stories about her, what she did, her profession, how many kids she had, where she was born? Like, none of that stuff's there. These are factual things, And he said, well, how would you verify it? I go, that part I haven't quite figured out. I go, but I do think that there should be a written record of human history. It seems crazy to me that, and we're living in a digital era and it doesn't exist. And so Jimmy Wales was like, that's interesting. I go, would you invest? He goes, it's kind of competitive to Wikia, so no. But I understand what you're doing, and I don't think Wikipedia would do that, but I can't say for sure. But the scholars that run it, I don't think they would really try to compete with that, because there could be gossip and they're not interested in that. I was like, okay. So we went back and he says, I want you to meet with Josh Koppelman, the founder of half.com, who now runs First Round Capital. So we meet with Josh. He loved the idea. He introduces me to Reid Hoffman. We fly out. In fact, he's like on the phone and he calls up Reid and he's like, hey, I got these guys here. He's like, would you like to meet with them? If you like it, I think I want in, but I'm just curious what you think. And he's like, yeah, have him come by the office. And he's like, all right, well, when do you think? And I was like, I go, I'll meet him tomorrow. And we're in New York City. And I'm like, I'll meet him tomorrow. And he's like, what do you mean tomorrow? I was like, I'll book the flight right now in Orbitz. And literally, I just booked the flight, went right there. Like, I literally left the office, grabbed some shit from my apartment, got in the airport at Newark Airport, and I was off, right? And the next day, first thing in the morning, crack of dawn, I'm up. I'm at the LinkedIn office, and I'm hanging out with Reid Hoffman. Within 5 seconds, he listened to what we had to say, showed us around the office and all that stuff first. And then he's like, I'm in. And so there we go. We had Raj, the Mayfield Fund, and Chamath Palihapitiya was there as well at the time, right? So you have Raj, Chamath, Reid, and Josh. What an all-star cast of investors, right? We build the business. 6 to 8 months later, they launch the iPhone and Facebook apps. And at that point, I realized, fuck. I was like, we could have done this as an app. We built like a whole website. It was like very Web 1.0, Web 2.0, 1.0. But everything was moving to this. I could see the day I got the iPhone, literally that summer, I was like, shit. I was like, we could have built this an entirely different way. And I think we could have solved for an issue that we had, which was duplication of profiles. because we could have verified people through what they call OAuth today, but back then it was Facebook Connect, right? So you would log in with your true identity through Facebook, and we'd know it's really Rob. And then Rob's mom could be the one that writes these comments about Rob's biography, not somebody who hates Rob saying inflammatory shit. We couldn't really do that. So there was like 30 of you. And if you were famous, there was 200 of you. Like we were scaling it really well, but we were having issues. And so I said, guys, we need to revamp this website. I need more capital. And then Josh actually said to me, he's like, he has a motto, which is fail fast. He's like, we made a small investment. It's $500,000 total between all of us. It didn't work out. Let's just move on. I was like, wait, what? And I'm like, Bolt's going bankrupt. I can see this happening, right? This isn't going to work out. I'm like, what the fuck do I do now? And that's when the idea for Gamers Media came up, which eventually became Yashi.
It's crazy because it really, to me, it just keeps bringing that fail forward line. So he says fail fast. To me, I didn't come up with this line. I think it might have been like I think it was Denzel Washington or some like random actor that came up with that said that line. I saw it somewhere and I'm like, fail forward, man, fail forward. And so that's something that I noticed with you, Jay, is you kept failing forward. Every time you failed, you moved a little bit forward because the failure and the forward part is because you networked along the failures.
Yes.
Every time you failed, you networked and you networked and you networked, and so you had the people to call at your disposal. So you were not only capable, but you also set yourself up that way. So it's like it's different than to just start from ground zero. Every failure you took, it was another foundation on top of the first foundation, and another foundation, another foundation. Before you knew it, you had this strong foundation. You had this belief in yourself because of how you built those. It's funny because the failures were actually successes when you look at it in that way, right?
Yeah, I have a friend that always says, when people say he got lucky, he's like, you say I got lucky, but I didn't trip upstairs, right? You trip downstairs. You're saying fail forward. He's like, you don't trip up the stairs. You walk up the stairs. You run up the stairs, right? You don't fall upstairs, right? And I do think there's a lot of luck in life, and I think I've been very, very lucky, but I don't think it's all luck, right? And I think it's just the ability to have pattern recognition and take something with you along with whatever those failures are and learn from them. And so I learned a lot from the failures. And one of the things I took with me was all the relationships and stuff.
So you started Gamers Media, which then becomes Yashi. So describe to me how that idea hit you and what that idea was, and then how that kind of turned into Yashi with Gamers Media.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. I was just texting my wife because the kids were yelling and screaming.
No worries. So you started Yashi after Gamers. Well, Gamers Media became Yashi. So what was Gamers Media? How did that idea hit you after that last situation with?
Sure. When we were at Bolt, Bolt had a really great sales organization, and I take no credit for that because I came in and I brought my video sharing site and the audience with me, but I wasn't a salesperson, so they had an existing sales team. That company's been around since 1996. At that point, there was like 9-10 years in making, and they had a lot of relationships with ad agencies, all this kind of stuff, And one of the things that we had done at Bolt is that we signed exclusive agreements with gaming sites and social media sites, badassbuddy.com, if you remember that. We sold all their advertising exclusively. So what we did is we packaged up the bolt.com traffic, and then we took audiences and that were similar audiences, and we merged it in, and we would go to an ad agency, and we would tell them, this is our audience and our extended audience. And so we would lock up the inventory under contract, and we had miniclip.com, RuneScape, Badass Buddy. Like there was a whole bunch of sites. And the one thing that performed the best that I could see in terms of engagement and all this kind of stuff was gaming. Gamers are highly engaged, and particularly on Flash games back then. Not as much on the multiplayer, MMORP, but we didn't do a lot of that. We did some of it, but we did mostly the Flash game stuff. And a great opportunity for Flash games, because we were a video sharing site, is that we had a lot of video advertisers for the 30-second spots, and you can just throw those in the beginning of the game before the game starts, because the game had to load. You remember they used to have like a little loading icon and stuff, depending on who the game developers were. They had their animated logos loading. So we would just insert the ad before the game while it was loading. And the gamers were really ready they knew they had to wait for the game anyway for 30 seconds or so back then. I don't know if it's like that today, but back then the games took like a while. And so it was just obvious transition. And so we did this on Miniclip and everything else, and we killed it. We did really well for advertising. And Bolt was like a bootstrap business, actually, at that time. Like, we didn't have venture capital at that point. They'd previously raised venture capital in the 90s. They had filed for an IPO in 1999. Mary Meeker was the banker with the bank and stuff. And then the 2000 crash happens. I think it was March or whatever, and it just imploded. Like there was no IPOs at that point, so they couldn't go public. And a few years later, they were facing probably a liquidation. And Aaron was the founder. He had a friend, Lou Kerner, and he says, "Hey, why don't we buy this back?" They bought it back from the VCs. And then they owned it 100%, and they had an outside angel investor or two. And then that's when they had me come in. And then while I was there, I saw that one of the things that we did really well was this extended audience. I called it like create reach, right? But there was like this extended audience where we created reach by going and signing contracts. And it's effectively an advertising network, right? In some ways, right? But it's very site specific. They weren't selling audiences and demographics and all that kind of stuff. It was just selling the audience on the website. So they would do homepage takeovers, pop-ups, banners, videos, all this kind of stuff. And that's what Gamers Media was born out of. The idea after that business was sunset and not working anymore, it was just the idea that we could just go out, and I had a lot of credibility in that industry within the Flash game developer industry because we were running Bolt and they all knew that we were the ones that sold mini clips traffic exclusively. And so it was widely known that we did that. And so when we closed down, I just reached out to all their competitors and stuff. And I was like, do you want me to do what we did for them for you? And it was like, who's saying no? Right. So everyone was like, yeah. And so I signed up like over 20 million uniques on the launch of our company for Gamers Media, 20 unique visitors, that is, on a monthly basis. And we launched with 20 million unique visitors like day one. And then we went out to the agencies and we started, knocking on doors, trying to sign contracts for advertising.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And that business evolved too, Rob. So it started as an agency-like business, sign a contract, go to the agency, you sign a contract with the website to get the inventory, go to the agency to get the demand, sign a contract, place the advertising on it. It was very, very manual. And then over time, we slowly progressed that into becoming an advertising technology company. So it eventually became a demand side platform. We changed the name. I sent you a link. People can watch the interview where I talk about it in more depth with John Warlow, which is the author of Built to Sell. I read his book that helped me refocus the business, the brand, the product offering, et cetera. We productized the business in many ways, and we got rid of everything that was a distraction, and we just focused on video. And then we had a real focus on local video. And that's what led us to selling to Nexstar Broadcasting, because they are the largest TV broadcasting company in the United States. I think today I don't even know how many. They have hundreds of TV stations throughout the country. It's like if you're watching the 6 o'clock news in Wichita, Kansas or something like that, and you're watching Fox News at 6 o'clock, it's not really Fox News. They license the name Fox from Fox, and it's really Nexstar or Sinclair Broadcasting. It's one of those guys, right? So those are the two major players in this space today. And they had 650 salespeople selling local television advertising to doctors and lawyers and accounting firms, and the largest one were car dealerships, right? So I recognized that as an opportunity before we even sold to them. I said, well, we can probably build a business around local video. And there's a huge suite of potential buyers that have all those types of advertisers ready, whether that's outdoor advertising, out-of-home advertising, right? Like the billboards that you see, Lamar, all that kind of stuff, right? Or it's newspaper, right? Like Hearst Media, or television, like broadcast, like the broadcast companies like Nexstar and Sinclair and Media General and all them. There's just a whole bunch of these types. Radio is another one, right? And you have to ask yourself, where's the puck going? Does Sinclair Broadcasting think that they're going to just magically just get a bunch of new viewers and just people are going to watching TV more in 10 years than they are today? Probably not. They know they need a digital strategy. We were the digital strategy. And then we had to just create interest amongst all those potential buyers. And that's kind of what we did.
So once you kind of built this thing out and you got to 20 million uniques and you're building out Yashi, and now it's gotten to a point, describe to me what the difference is between someone building just a business to make money and someone that's making a business to sell it eventually. Because the first time I heard that was actually, ironically enough, it reminded me of it when I heard you and John speaking about it. But I was at a Tony Robbins seminar when I was I want to say I was maybe 21. I went to this Tony Robbins thing. It was a cheap one where he was just in town in Washington when I was over in Washington at one time on a collectibles trip. Maybe I was 24, 23 actually. And he was talking about, you don't have a business unless you've built it to sell. If you haven't built your business to sell, he might have stole it from John, to be honest with you. Maybe he took that line from him. But when I heard him and you talking about it, it's that's the difference between somebody that actually executes and makes a company that gets sold for $33 million and somebody that just has a company that's making them a little bit of money, making them cash flow. But you built it that it was so good that somebody else wanted it. Describe to me how that's different, how that was different with Yashi than, say, a traditional business.
So what you want to do is you want to build a sustainable business, right? Something that is a repeatable model that you can just plug in people into your business that continue to run and just keep repeating the cycle over and over. I have a neighbor that started Hand and Stone, which is a massage place. It's like a spa, and very similar, right? Like he built a very repeatable model. Every time he opens up a new location, he can estimate roughly what his revenues will be and his profits so it's just about how many locations can we open up. And it's really about money at that point and just time and their capacity and bandwidth to do it. I have another neighbor who was a franchisee. The other guy was a franchisor. He was at the top, right? I had another neighbor. He opened up a gym in Miami, Planet Fitness, right? And he wasn't the founder of Planet Fitness. He was one of the franchisees. He recently sold it to a private equity firm that was owned by Steve Young, the football player. Can't say the amount, it was undisclosed, but killed it. And they had 42 locations with 10 under development and a whole bunch of territory rights to keep it opening more. So private equity firms love these type of businesses because they see it as, well, we know that the revenues that he's have are going to continue on. We know that he has the opportunity to open 10 more because he's under development for him. And we know he could open 30 more. And then he could also acquire other ones that also have the current businesses plus the territory. So it's a total repeatable model. And so they can predict what the cash flows will be in the future. And they can say, I'm going to buy you for X today. And I'm not even going to have to necessarily sell it. In a world we live in today, it's strange, but it's a strange world. But there's no risk-free money anymore, right? So you can't buy the bond that beats the hurdle rate of inflation, right? So they're forcing investors to buy businesses that have predictable revenue and growth that can essentially provide a yield on the capital of a return of capital for them, right? So that's what we're for Yashi in many ways, but it has to make sense for who's buying it, right? And so for us, it made sense that we had to have a focus that there's a suitor of buyers, that a lot of them that could potentially bid and competitively bid against and try to get a good price for it. So, for us at Yashi, it was just, we were in the local video, right? And there's just, and local advertising essentially is really what it was. And so like, who are the people, or who are the companies, I should say, that have a whole suite of advertisers already, existing advertisers and salespeople, and do we just plug right into them, right? And so that's kind of what we did with Yashi. We kind of like transformed the business into something that was plug and play for potential buyers.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And I think that when I'm talking with you, it makes me want to run through a brick wall, man. I'm thinking like, okay, I could be doing this with my business right now. I could be doing that with my business right now. I'm not thinking, it's like, it's people like you that you could just sit back, drink Mai Tais on some beach somewhere and just call it a day, but you keep moving forward and you keep doing interviews like this and you have your own channel. And by the way, the interview that you were talking about with John, I'm going to have that. There's a link going to be down there in the description, guys. So please, after watching this podcast, make sure you check that out. Like, I know you hear that and you don't actually do it, but please do that because Jay, it's really worth your while, these interviews. I just got done listening to that one, and that one was specifically very inspiring. I can see
John's great.
I can see how it inspired you so much to just not put down his book. You talk about being in Hawaii and you're like, what?
Yep.
It also like, so you talk about luck and serendipity in a way. And it's like, you were at that specific moment on your honeymoon. You said that you just decided, I'm going to read this book on the beach. And, most guys are going to be thinking, I want to be drinking. I want to be with my wife. I want to be having some fun. I want to be, in the pool over here, maybe in the ocean, I want to do some snorkeling or something, some rock jumps, like, what am I going to do over here in Hawaii? Yeah.
That was a baby moon, by the way. The baby moon is like when you have a new baby on the way.
Oh, yeah.
It's like almost, yeah. It was a baby moon for our second baby. So the second baby was in the oven and our first baby was 18 months and she came with us. But yeah, that was a baby moon. That was a great time. But a lot of things are serendipitous. Like we almost sold to a company called Van Wagner. If you're in the New York area, people who see the billboards in Times Square, you'll see CBS Outdoor, et cetera. One of them is Van Wagner. And I'm on a plane. And we had a condo years ago in Florida. So we're on a plane and we're flying. And I'm always reading business magazines, books, whatever. It's just I'm always consuming, right? Which, by the way, is how you create your own luck in life. You have to keep consuming information. It formulates your thoughts and opinions, and just you get into a different place in life, right? Like that's my opinion. So I was reading like Inc. magazine, and they used to do this like how I did it piece where they would interview an entrepreneur about his success, right? And they would summarize it in like 1 or 2 pages, right? And they ask him a bunch of questions, Q&As, right? It was like question, answer, question, And the guy's name is Richard Shapps. And I'm reading this thing and I'm like, wow, this business is so analogous to what we're doing, right? Because we had an advertising business, right? And this had to be like, I don't know, maybe it was like 2009 or 10, right? So we were a few years into the business at that point. I'm on the plane. I'm reading this thing, and my wife's like the kind of person on the plane when the air goes, shh, she's always passed out, right? So, and I'm like nudging. I'm like, you got to read this. You got to read this. And she's like, can we just read it when we get to the condo later? And I'm like, no, you got to read this now. And she's like, why? I was like, just fucking read it, right? So she reads this thing. It takes her like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And she's like, what was I reading? And like, it was weird for me. Like certain people consume information, and I say, well, what do you think of that? And they don't always tell you what you're thinking, which I always find very interesting because you have a prior life experiences and understanding that brings you and formulates your opinion about what you just read, and they may not, right? So she had a different opinion. So I just said to her, I go, I read that and I say to myself, Kate, we're going to meet this guy someday and he's going to buy our fucking company because he should, because it makes sense. Because we're the extension for digital. They don't have digital. They were doing outdoor advertising and they do billboards. If you ever saw the all state in the back of the end zone in college football, when it has like the hands up and they kick the field goes through, he invented that. That was him, right? Like he created all this kind of stuff. And I was like, he did that. He did the planes. He bought all the airplanes in the Jersey Shore because they're in New York, right? And like when you're on the beach and you see like those planes drive by with like, Jenkinson's Boardwalk, $2 Miller Lights tonight, Friday night, and he bought that. And I'm like, what the fuck? But he put like national advertising on it instead of like Jenkinson's paying them a few $1,000s. He went to Heineken, the actual company, and they paid him $10,000, right? Like he was smart. He upscaled everything. And he did a variety of things. They would do digital billboards, all kinds of stuff, right? And I'm like, well, if they can do digital billboards and they can control that remotely, why can't you do digital advertising on the internet? Like he should, And so, time goes on. A few years later, I have a chief operating officer in my company. His uncle was at J&K Securities, which is like a broker dealer up in New York. And I said, we want to raise some capital. I would love to meet with your uncle. Let's go up there. So we go meet with him. And we're sitting down in his office and I'm describing my business to him and what we do. And I'm not even kidding you. He says, I got the perfect guy for you. Let me get my phone. Hold on a second. Calls him up. He goes, hey, Richard, I'm sitting with a guy named Jay Gould. Richard from Van Wagner. And I'm like, who? I don't know who he is. I'm like, not paying. I don't connect the dots yet. And he hangs up and he goes, all right, Richard said he'd love to meet you guys. You can come in there tomorrow afternoon at like 2:00. You available? And I was like, yeah. He goes, oh, cool. It sets it up. And I'm like, who is Richard, by the way? I'm happy to do it, but who the fuck are we talking about? He goes, he runs Van Wagner. And I was like, I looked at my wife, and she looked at me and I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Like I had this premonition that this guy would buy my company someday. So we go down to his office the next day. I don't get nervous in meetings. I know my heart's beating. So I'm like, how is this even happening? Right. So we go down there, we meet with him, amazing individual, right? Like just guy was a cab driver in the 1970s and he saw billboards and he says, I could do that. And he started a billboard company and he just would knock on doors and say, I need to talk to the owner of this building. And he would literally beg them to finally get an owner on the phone, beg them, can I put a billboard up on the side? And everybody, no. Finally gets his first contract. Then he's like, well, who's the advertiser? I got to go get that. But if you give me the billboard space, I'll get you the advertiser. And he did. He got like, whatever. And then he grew a business and then he sold it for like 100 million. He bought it back. And then he sold it again for like $400 million, like a few years ago, right? I mean, this guy's unbelievable, right? He's a hustler, true grit, amazing individuals. Anyway, he wanted to buy the company and he literally gave us, we negotiated back and forth term sheet, but at the end of the day, it wasn't enough money. So it didn't go through, but I have all the respect in the world for him and what he's built, but we just couldn't get the deal done. But it's so weird. Like you said, like it just, sometimes there's this serendipitous thing. And it's like, and that was one of those weird things where I read the article in the magazine and I literally looked at my wife and go, he's going to buy us someday. And she's looking at me like, you're a freaking nut, And sure enough, we're sitting in the office at J&K Securities and one of his best friends is Richard Chaps. I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Like you can't make this stuff up, man. It didn't happen, but it was a cool story.
It seems like it's serendipitous and, there's a ton of luck that has to do with it, but there's also the execution. So it's like a serendipity mixed with execution in there that makes you a success story, Jay. It's like there was serendipity, there was luck. You were in the right place, the right time. You were born in the right area. But at the same time, a lot of people get the apple dangled in front of them. Not many just grab the apple and take a bite out of it, And that's something that you did, and that's something that I've noticed with a lot of successful entrepreneurs. Is it comes down to they didn't give up, and they also grabbed what it was dangling in front of them. Where a lot of people just run after it and they don't actually reach out and grab it. So the execution.
Woody Allen used to say 80% of your success is showing up. Showing up is half the battle, And I showed up a lot. I just put myself in positions that were very uncomfortable that I think a lot of people probably don't. How many times does somebody ask you to do something and then you're like, you push it off and you're like, I don't know. And then you don't know what would have happened. Like you just gotta get yourself in the room. You have to get yourself in a position for success. And And if you don't do that, you're guaranteeing yourself to not have success. That's all you're doing. I think it's another Wayne Gretzky sign. It's like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? You just have to keep taking shots, man. And that's just what life is about.
So with Richard, it didn't work out with Richard. Even like you put it, the law of attraction works because I like to consider it like a probabilities realm where it's like if you think about it, you thought about meeting Richard, you thought about selling it to them, and then it actually came to be because you changed your probability from 0 to 10%, 20%, 30%. The more you thought about it, the more you put it into the universe. So it's not just thinking about it. It was the action of moving in that direction while thinking about it. You change the probability. If this was a simulation, let's say, it's like, well, your probability went from 0% of meeting Richard to 30, 40, 50% until eventually you met him. And so what I wanted to get towards is like what after that and saying, I really respect you. I can't believe I was able to even speak with you, but the numbers aren't right. Hopefully maybe we can talk again in the future, but it's just not right for me. How did you find the right buyer and who was the right buyer? And then how did that play out?
That's also a very serendipitous, weird thing. So we had a banker, AGC Capital or AGC Partners. And the guy's name is John Guido, and he was representing us, and he did a conference once a year for all his clients of the year. Right. And then he brings in all his companies that he's representing to try to sell or raise them money. And then he brings in investors and potential buyers. And he sets up like almost like speed dating where I went in like these rooms and I would pitch our company to these guys like one by one. And after the first couple of meetings, I was like, I don't really like the way this feels. It's weird. Like it's not the way typical meetings are, the way he set it up. I just wasn't happy with that particular type of process. Nothing against John or AGC. I just wasn't comfortable with it. So after like the second meeting, I was like, I'm leaving. It's the kind of guy I am. I was like, I just do whatever I want. I was like, I'm out. And my partner, who was my chief operating officer, was this guy, Scott Hoffman. He's like, we can't just leave. And I was like, I can do whatever the fuck I want to do. I'm out of here. We're going to find a new bank because I don't like this, And so he's like, hold on, let me go get a coffee in the conference room. And so we go over there, and there was like on the stage, there was a bunch of people talking. There was like people from AOL, IAC. Another one was Nexstar Broadcasting, this guy named Tom O'Brien. And he's up there getting his coffee, and I don't drink coffee. I don't need it. I'm too energetic, right? And he's like spinning his coffee and stuff. And he's like trying to convince me to stay. Our banker sees me from the other side of the room, comes running over. He's like, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in a meeting right now down the hall." I said, I'm not doing those meetings. He's like, well, what the fuck are you talking about? The guys are waiting for you right now. He's like, oh, Jesus Christ, Jay. Because I'm like that scrappy, like entrepreneur, does whatever the fuck he wants. And it's like, I'm making him look bad to these guys. And I was like, I'm not going. And he's like, why? I set these meetings up. I go, this isn't a meeting. I'm in a meeting, dude. And the guy's like, this still interesting. Yeah. He's not even looking at me. I go, they're totally disengaged. He goes, dude. I go, first of all, I looked at the guy after the meeting. I look them up and I see what they do, what companies they have in their portfolio company as investors, because these were all potential investors. They don't even invest in shit like us. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, and he's like, well, they might. And I was like, dude, no. I go, John, love you, bro, but I'm not doing this, And you go and you do the initial contact. If they're interested, we could do a follow-up call on a phone call. And if they're interested again, they can come fly out and meet me in my fucking office. Or I can go to their office, depending on who they are and how much capital they have and all this kind of stuff, He's like, that's not the way it works. I go, that is how it works. And if it isn't, then it isn't how it works for you and me. Right. So let me know. And so I was ready to leave. I just didn't want to do it. Him and Scott were talking, like trying to figure out how to convince me to stay. And I'm not listening. I'm like glazing past them, past all the heads, and I'm in the back of the room and I'm looking at these people on the stage. And I grabbed the pamphlet. I go, give me that pamphlet. And I'm looking at who they are. I'm like, who the hell are these people? And it's like AOL, IAC, Nexstar Broadcasting. And I'm like, and the Nexstar Broadcasting guy, it made sense for me. Like it clicked. There was something there that made sense. So I said, John, I want to talk to that guy. He's like, what guy? And he looks back and I was like, the guy up there on the stage. He's like, AOL? You said you didn't want to talk to AOL. Because I told him, I don't want to talk to the major internet media companies, Google, AOL, Facebook, et cetera. They're not going to buy us. I knew they wouldn't buy us, right? They already have our capabilities, or they've already made large acquisitions in many cases. Like Yahoo had bought Right Media. Like I just didn't think that they would want to buy us. I go, I don't want to waste my time going down a rabbit hole for weeks and months, right? When I just have a high probability that it probably doesn't work. So let's go to people that need us, that don't have our capabilities. That would be old media, right? This is the newspaper companies, the radio, outdoor advertising, television. That's what I wanted. I go, here we are, television advertising. And he's like, but they don't have it. They've never made an acquisition like this. I go, exactly. He's like, oh, Jay. And I'm like, bro, set up the fucking meeting or I'm leaving right now. And he's like, all right, let me go. So they get off the stage 10 minutes later. He walks down. Everybody's running up to them to get like their autograph, so to speak, like, ask him questions and shit. And he's like, come here, John. So John brings me over. He's like, Jay, Tom, Jay, I'll leave it to you. I said, I wanted to meet with you just for maybe like 10 minutes. You want to go downstairs? There's a bar downstairs. And he's like, it's like 10 a.m. And I was like, whatever. So I go downstairs. he gets a cup of coffee, and I said, tell me about what your digital strategy is. Because not only is he the chief revenue officer of the company, he was the executive vice president for digital, and they had no fucking digital, right? So I was like, what are you guys doing in revenue for digital? He's like, I can't tell you that. I'm like, you're a publicly traded company. Why can't you tell me that? I can pull it up right now in a 10K or something. Like, what are we talking about? We're doing like 20 million in revenue for digital. And I was like, and what's your number? He's like, what's my number? This guy asking me how much money I'm worth. And I was like, no, I want to know what I looked you up. It looks like you've been at Nexstar for about 6 months. So when the CEO brings you in, look, I'm a CEO of a little company. He's the CEO of a really big company. I would imagine he has a stated goal for you to hit. I'm sure you have milestones and bonuses tied to it. And he just cuts me off and he goes, 100 million. 100 million. So you're at 20 million now. I go, yeah. I go, we did 25 million last year. We'll do 35 to 40 million this year. And that's all I did. I just gave him a look and he goes, that's interesting. Hold on. Let me give him my business card. And immediately, like, I knew I had this guy hook, line, and sinker, that he was thinking about a potential acquisition. I didn't say that you should invest. I didn't say you should buy us. I didn't say any of that. I just implied the acquisition. And I knew that he figured out what I was saying. And he was like, this is really interesting. He's like, so tell me more about what you do. He gives me his business card and he starts going through, and we start going through. I open up my deck, and as I would have done with any of the other people we did. But this was a targeted individual at that point, right? Like, it totally made sense. And now he was my champion internally, right? Like, I had this guy, I knew he was aligned. He has a goal, get to 100 million. He probably gets bonuses, stock option. Who the fuck knows what his exact compensation plan was for incentives, but there was some incentive for him to do this. And he was our champion internally, right? So once you have one person internally that's pushing you, now you got to get the rest of the people to buy in. And so that's how it started.
That's brilliant. It's funny, like looking back on it, all of your decisions were the perfect decision to make. Oh no, these aren't the right people. No, we're not dealing with them. You know, this isn't the right.
Well, I
person.
could no. Let me be very clear. I would be very clear. I could have made a very terrible decision by doing that. For all I know, Rob, I could have went in the fourth or fifth meeting, and I could have got $100 million investment to the company with $30 million outside capital coming to me and my wife. They do like a secondary. We don't know what would happen. What would have happened? There could have been a better outcome. There could have been a worse outcome. So I don't know that it was the best decision. I just know that the decision did come out with a scenario which I was comfortable with in the very end, you know. But we don't really know if I could have had there could have been a better outcome. You don't, that you'll never know, you know.
So do you actually wish you did take those interviews, or are you still like, do you believe? See, that's what I was getting
totally
at.
Comfortable in my skin. I love where I'm at, and it worked out for the best, for what I believe is the best. You have to live with your decisions, and it is what it is, right? We also, had we not sold Yashi, I think we would have had over 100 million in revenue by now. It's been going on 7 years this January. So I think we were growing at like 80% a year. Even if you decelerate our growth to like 30 to 50% a year, I think we would have reached probably 100 million plus by now. And in the world we live in today, with, as you know, you're a Bitcoiner, in your world you live in today, and you look at the interest rates where it's at and the money printing, and you see the valuations of everything just going through the roof, parabolic. I think our company would be worth hundreds of million, if not $1 billion plus, and we probably go public in a SPAC today. Likely. I actually recently talked to my old banker about this, and he's like, I don't think you'd be going public in a SPAC. And I was like, I think I would. He goes, nah, I don't think so. Add text out of favor. I go, I think you're wrong, but it doesn't matter. What are we arguing about? Who gives a shit, you know? But in the end, there probably would have been more opportunities and options for us moving forward. I just didn't see that. When we sold the company, part of it was I was trying to time the markets a little bit. And I always say, don't time the market, it's time in the market, you know, the Bitcoin line. But in this world, in the fiat world and things like this, there's expansions and contractions, right? And we were in 2009 was the bottom, right? And it was 2015 that we sold. So you're looking at like a 6-year run, and the average bull market is like 8 years. I didn't want to go through, have a very successful company, then get hit with a bear market. And who knows how bad that bear market could have been. Shit, we could have gone into a Great Depression after that Great Recession. We just didn't know. And I didn't want to be running a business and instead of getting sued, be victim to an economic collapse, right? I was like, let me get some chips off the table and let's just see where things shake out. And then turns out it's like the longest bull market ever. Like, I don't even think we ever really crashed. Like, they'll say that we crashed because they technically went past the 20% crash at some point, you know, but to me, it really didn't crash. 2018, it crashed, came right back. 2020 crash, came right back because the Fed's not allowing the crash anymore, right? It's the Fed put, as we know, but I didn't know any of that stuff in 2014. We decided to hire a banker, right? I'm looking at the world. We're 5 years in. By the time we maybe get a transaction done, it'll be 6 years in, if we're lucky enough to sell it. If not, we'll raise enough capital to sustain any type of an economic collapse of some sort to be able to get through it, you know? So we were looking at two options, right? One is infuse capital into the business, take some money off the table for me and my wife, leave the rest of it into the business for growth, or sell the whole thing. And we decided with option two.
It's a really, really cool thing that you bring up when you're comfortable with what happened and you're just moving forward and everything. And it's like, well, I mean, it's better than a punch in the face, you know? I mean, you talk about getting to 100 million, 200 million. It's like 33 million is all right, Jay. You know, it's going to, I think you did fine with it, you know? But, you know, it's funny you say that because, nobody I mean, this is another thing to note with when you sold Yashi, you said it was in 2013, right? Or 2014, 2013?
January
2015. So this is, I mean, the collapse had happened in 2007. You still remember that. It was only 8 years prior.
2009. Yeah.
2009.
The bottom was March 9th, 2009. Yeah.
March 9th, 2009. And so you look back at then, and so you remembered, you know, okay, well, when things are good, you know, maybe we should, I mean, this is enough money to change my life right now. I'm going to do this. And now I can do pretty much anything I want after Yashi. I can do whatever. So I guess that's a good segue. And I also want to note that's like, nobody knows what's happening in the future. We're all just guesstimating, you know, we have no idea. The only real certainty is that the dollar is going to lose its buying power. That's the real certainty that we know, but that's only one guarantee.
Rob, I wasn't even thinking about that back then. Like the world, the way I view the world today versus the way I viewed the world before we sold it is an entirely different world today. And it was the same world then. I just didn't see it, right? When you see what we've seen, you can't unsee what we've seen when it comes to Bitcoin and stuff, right? We just can't. But at that time, I had not quite seen that.
So
let me tell you something. If I had sold the company and just bought Bitcoin at that time, I'd be worth like $20 billion today or something, right? Like it's insane. But I don't know many people that actually saw that back then. I think that all started to come into scope in 2018 because when they started raising the rates in 2015, I was actually happy about that. I'm sitting on a pile of cash, just sell the company, and they did a rate hike. And I'm like, finally, we're going off of 0% interest rates. Like, God, it's like, I can't make any money with cash. I have to be forced into the markets. I have to be forced into risk capital. Like, that just didn't make any sense to me, like why the world was this way. And it was just going on for a really long time from 2009 to 2015, pretty much 0% interest rates the whole time. And then they started increasing the rates. And I was pretty happy about that. I was like, I'd like to see us get to a savings rate on like a 10-year for 6, 7, 8% again. That would be interesting. When I was running Bolt.com with Aaron and Lou, that's what they were. They were like 6% interest rates for you got a money market at 5-6% back then. Money markets are like 0.2%. It's like, what? And so when I started seeing those rates go up, they did that from 2015 to 2018. So that's why I love when I hear Bitcoiners tell us like they can't raise interest rates. I'm like, they did, and they will. They will raise interest rates. They'll fuck it up. They'll do it again, and they'll cause another crash. That's what the Fed does. They'll eventually do that for tightening and to try to bring the valuations back down a little bit. Because if you don't, it'll run into like unfathomable PE ratios in the stock market. It just won't even make any sense, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they just keep doing what they're doing and the PE ratio is 50x. You know, it's like, what? It just doesn't make any sense. But it does if there's no alternative, right? That is what people will do with their money. And so it looked like there was hope for a potential alternative for some of your capital that's sitting on the sidelines to sit in a risk-free that's at least keeping up with inflation, right? We're at such a point now, it's like it's beyond control. It's like it's out of control, right? But back then, I wasn't thinking any of that. And then when I think it really hit me was in December of 2018. They did that last rate hike as well as offloading on the balance sheet, and the market just capitulated and sold off very, very rapidly. I remember it was Christmas Eve, and I'm in my office upstairs, and I'm like, you know, and I'm like, click, and I'm buying stocks up like crazy that day because it was just like it was just like selling off like crazy. And my wife's like, "Are you going to come in? Like everybody's showing up." You know, we were at a party and everything, and I'm like, give me a minute. This is a half day on trading day, and I'm buying all this shit up, and I'm click, you know, and I'm like, this didn't make any sense. But it seemed to me that we were just going to V-shape again, and that's what we did. And it was like the Fed is backstopping the whole market, and that's when it clicked to me. We're never going to have high interest rates. I can't see it in my lifetime, right? Unless we have an absolute shakeout, complete reset, you know? And I don't think they're going to allow that to happen. It's got to be something that they just lost control somehow. And that's when it hit me. And I was like, oh God, why didn't I see this years ago? You know? And like, it was, you have like a moment, it's almost like a movie, like tunnel vision, you fly backwards and you're like, why the fuck didn't I see that a few years ago? You know? And I was like, man, my net worth will be impacted because of that, missing the boat earlier, but at least I got it now, like, and that's when I started to lean in on a bunch of investments that I had. And that was it.
Yeah, but that you bring up something in my mind where a lot of Bitcoiners miss this, and I appreciate it about you, Jay, is that a lot of Bitcoiners, they'll say, oh, I just bought Bitcoin and I have 2 Bitcoin, I'm good for life now. I got 2, I'm good. They have the whole thing. A lot of them only have 0.2, and they say, I'm good for life. I got 0.2, 0.25, I'm good. But the thing is, it's like what I notice with Bitcoiners, they forget to build stuff. Some of them, they think it's just buy it, I'm going to be rich in the future and I'm done now. But it's like, no, buy it. And don't forget to be fiat mining. Don't forget to be building stuff, because we're still going to need people to build stuff. We can't just expect to
Preston
be in this
talks about this.
deflationary. Yeah, and it's like that to me is like I think I said a tweet a while back where it's like I want Bitcoiners to own businesses.
Yes.
Like because you want a Bitcoiner to be in charge of that restaurant. You want a Bitcoiner to be in charge of your laundromat or whatever. Because
there's a lot of lazy Bitcoiners. There is a lot of lazy Bitcoiners. They feel like they're not wealthy yet, but on paper they have a stated amount, like you said, whatever that number is, and it doesn't matter. Everybody's wealth is a different number, and so whether it's 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoins, 0.1 Bitcoin, whatever it is, they have a future projection of where they believe Bitcoin will be in the future, and they view their net worth not as it's currently stated in the current Bitcoin price, but what they believe the future price of Bitcoin is, and they just sit and wait. I give them all the credit in the world. I didn't do that in my career. I built things like you said, like you're doing. Like I built stuff, and I just don't put all my eggs in any basket. That's not the way I am. So like I was just building and building and building for years. And I agree with you. Like I think that there needs to be more development within Bitcoin itself, on top of Bitcoin, on the rails. We're not seeing enough of that, because I think a lot of people are just like, they're an absolutist. They say, well, I know I have the answer and it's Bitcoin, and I believe that too. It is the truth over time. The question is timing. Like, when do we get there? And some of these time horizons, when I talk to some of these people, they're like, it's going to happen in the next 5 years or 10 years. And I'm like, you sure about that, right? Because you're doing nothing else right now. You fucking sure about that? Because if you're wrong, you wasted a lot of time. You're waiting, right? I hope you're right. Because if you're right, I'm going to be really fucking wealthy. So I hope you're right. But if you're wrong, what else are you working on? They have no plan B. That is their plan B. It's their plan A, B through Z, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm obviously aligned with that, right? But I have other assets as well, so I'm not fully aligned with that. And Hodl tells me all the time, he's like, you need to have everything in Bitcoin. I'm like, good for you, brother. He's like, but I'm not doing that yet.
It's funny, like when there's pullbacks, because I have collectibles and stuff, it's like, hey, I almost want to make that tweet, but I don't want to be like that guy, getting into wars on Twitter.
No, don't do it on a pullback, because that's just market's movement. That's volatility.
But it's like, if you have other assets, it's like, well, guess what? Now my other assets that's in a good position, a profitable position right now, all of a sudden Bitcoin pulled off of 68K. Now it's down to 53K. I can buy a lot more now because I had some fiat mining going on over here, and now I can take advantage of this opportunity. But I think it's just so important to note that. I'm glad that you agree, because I get that from you, Jay, where it's just like you build stuff regardless of if you made 100 million, 200 million, a billion, you'd still be like, I want to build the next big thing on the internet, and that actually is a good thing. I want to get to that as a topic. Is you sold Yashi 33 million, that wire finally fucking lands, you finally get it in the account, and then you go, okay, what am I going to start investing in? How did Bitcoin come up on your radar? What companies are you interested in right now? What parts of the internet are you going, wow, this is the next big thing?
Yeah. So first purchase of Bitcoin was 2016. 2017 started leaning in more. 2018, 19, in 2020, I did not buy a lot of Bitcoin. Actually, I was so focused on stocks at that point, which is fucking crazy. What a mistake, right? Like, we had such a buying opportunity last year, and at that time, I was seeing the market just completely in disarray and falling apart. And all I kept thinking last year was, wow, it'd be nice to get some yield, right? Because like I had no income. I have no income, right? I'm an asset owner, right? So I have real estate, stocks, commodities, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff that I sit on. And to me, it's just about capital. I make wealth through capital gains, right? That's so you hold, you wait, it grows, appreciates, and at some point you could sell them and have to pay capital gains at that point. And over time, you could also just borrow against your assets as well. You don't have to sell them. So that's kind of the game that I've been playing. But last year I was saying to myself, oh, it'd be great to get some of these blue chip stocks that are paying like 1-2% on dividends, right? Essentially on the cost basis. But as the price was going down, the payout's the same, the yield was going up, right? And I was like, wouldn't it be nice if we can get like 7-8% if this thing really fucking crashes, if we go into a meltdown like we've never seen? I was just sitting there like, yeah, this is great. I'm sitting on a bunch of cash. I liquidated stuff towards the top, and I'm like waiting to just buy shit at the bottom. What I should have just done was buy Bitcoin. I wasn't thinking appropriately. So for me on Bitcoin, like I said, got in, I first learned about it by reading a blog, a VC.com, which is Fred Wilson. So Fred was probably the first person that I probably heard about Bitcoin through the grapevine of like my tech friends and stuff. But like the thing that really caught my attention was a blog post that he wrote back in, I think, 2012 or 13. And I was like, this is interesting. But what I didn't catch in his writings, and you can go back and read them, and he certainly wasn't talking about it as a store of value. He wasn't talking about the Fed and interest rates and money supply. Like nobody, that wasn't the narrative back then. That is the narrative today. That is the strong narrative for Bitcoin now. And mostly because of 2018 and 2020. Last year definitely solidified that as the true narrative for Bitcoin. But it just wasn't the case back then, you know? So I got into it, but I slowly kind of accumulated my position over time. And then and then what it is, every time I made a purchase, Rob, I just increased the amount each time, which is crazy because I'm paying higher amounts. I'm putting more money down to higher amounts. Should have been the opposite, but that's the way I did it. And I think a lot of investors kind of, they purchase on the way up, it's like a momentum play. As it's moving up, they're buying more and more and accumulating. But so that, that's kind of what I did. I got into other assets. Like I started to invest. I'm also an angel investor in tech companies. I'm in over 65 companies. 8 of them have grown on to become unicorns. I have 18 unicorns in my portfolio because I also invest in unicorns. So we got into like CoinList as an example recently. I know Naval Ravikant, and I respect what he's done, and he's a smart guy. And I just say to yourself, like, well, what do you think that could potentially go as an investment? And I think that, probably 100x is my guess from where it was at, without stating what the valuation was that we got in at recently. But I can see that doing easily 100x over a same time period. I don't think Bitcoin beats that. I do think that there are certain investments that will beat Bitcoin in a time horizon. Over the long term, no. But what is your time horizon? If it's over the next 5 or 10 years, I don't see Bitcoin in 5 years going 100x from here. Could it? Could it go to $100 trillion? I guess it's possible. We'd have to have some major collapse of some sort for something like that to happen. But I'm not really banking on that. I do think that this is not a widely shared view amongst the maximalists, but I do think that the Fed will keep the party going longer than people think they can. So you got to kind of look at that and say to yourself, how long do you think the Fed can keep this bullshit going, right? How long do you think that the fiat-minded people will buy into the bullshit? And I think it's longer than most people who are in the rabbit hole believe, Preston and I talk about this quite a bit. And even Preston says that there will be a point, he's only Bitcoin, right? But there will be a point where he will divest and start investing in companies that will provide a better return moving forward than Bitcoin will. And that's probably more like 10 or 15 years from now for him, And, but you can't just be so absolutist and ideological about it. You have to just think about what are the returns, what is the probability of the return. Like Bitcoin is the best asymmetric bet right now, probably for the most part, but it's not so sure. Like when HODL got into it at $200 a Bitcoin, he's got margin of safety today, right? Like it doesn't matter what Bitcoin does for him, right? Because it's not going below $200, right? It does. Like if we go into a major bear market next year and it drops down to 10,000 or 5,000, he's still way up. There's no reason to liquidate a position, try to time the markets. Why would you do that? But so like his 200, let's do some math here. So if it goes to $5 million, right? That means he has a 20, am I doing this right? Holy fuck. $5 million divided by 200.
This is the 6.15 guy, right?
Yeah.
So the funny thing is he's got this big name, but 6.15, it's like, so he's got 6.15 Bitcoin.
No, he's got more than that. Bro.
Okay. So why do you come up with that name, that number?
That was a meme.
Like,
you gotta Google it. There was a meme that somebody said, how much is enough? And he was like 6.15. It was just like a meme. And it's
just like, fuck it. That's the number. Like, 6.15.
I think it's like, cause it also infers like, down below, it's like, I'm happy with my 6.15. It's like, what does that really mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of like.
It all makes so much sense now. It all makes so much sense. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, but it's 6.15. I think that's a lot of money, right? Like, $5 million. It's like $5 million a coin. It's like $31 million, something like that for net worth in today's standard of inflation adjusted. That's a lot of money, right? That's like ultra high net worth in the future. So I think if you have 6.15 Bitcoin in the future, you would be considered by today's standard ultra high net worth what they're considered today, So
absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, you just got to look at like what do you think what do you think the expected returns will be on a going forward basis, right? And so I see Bitcoin going to probably $100 to $200 trillion in our lifetime. I don't know when, but I don't think that's like it's going to get there in 5 years and then just stop. Like that doesn't make sense to me. So a lot of people always say, and I think this is disingenuous, they'll say, Bitcoin's been growing at 200% a year. And no, they won't say it has. They'll say Bitcoin grows at 200% a year. What investment do you have that you would put your money in that's going to grow 200% a year? So are you implying that for the rest of time, it will grow for 200% a year? Take out a compound interest calculator, type in those numbers at the current price at say $60,000, 200% for the next 30 years. That's more than the store value of all global assets in the world by a magnitude of like 50 or some shit. It doesn't even make any sense, right? It's quadrillions of dollars worth of what the market cap would be. The entire market cap of everything is like $400 or $500 trillion, right? Today. That's like stocks, commodities, real estate, et cetera, right? Like it just doesn't make sense. Now you could say derivatives and money and all this other stuff and add that in too, but now you're getting tricky, right? You're trying to create a narrative. You're trying to back yourself into something. If you want to look at the current value of all the assets, I don't believe that you can take all of the current value assets, inflation adjusted to the future, to the current value today, and say that all of that value will go to Bitcoin, because there's a utility value to everything too. Like your house has a value. It could just be the construction cost of the house moving forward, not a store value, right? So the house being built, the actual house, maybe an average home in America costs $150,000, $200,000 in building cost outside of the land. The land is an arbitrary subjective price. And the price they put on top of all that is a premium of store value, right? And so that probably disappears, over the next 20 years. That probably goes away. So maybe a house costs $100,000 to buy that today is worth $700,000, $600,000 store value out the window. If you sit in your house, you're going to get decimated. I agree with that. PE ratios. When Warren Buffett was buying into the stock market, like Coca-Cola back in the 1960s and shit, what was the PE ratio? Was it 30x? Not even close. Like 6, 10. You know what I mean? That means it's 6 times earnings. If they don't grow, it takes you 6 years to get your money back based on dividends or should say based on profit, right? We sold our company for 6 times earnings, right? In the world we live in today, as a technology company, we probably sell for 30 times earnings. So if we didn't grow, it would take the buyer 30 years to get their money back. At the height, like a year or so ago, Tesla was trading at 1,200 times earnings. Okay, that makes no sense. I don't know how you justify 1,200 PE. That just doesn't even make any sense, right?
I what blows my mind with Tesla, and this actually, when you were talking about, timing things and not knowing what's going to happen in the future, the worst thing I ever learned how to do was options trading. I wish I could go back in time when I was like 18 years old, and my friend Tyler Pasley, I'll never forget, sent me a message, and he was like, "Hey man, you got to learn about options. You're investing in stocks. You got to learn about options." At the time, I had my entire net worth of like 20 grand or something I had saved up at that point when I was like 18, 19. I was living in Santa Monica. And I remember he's like, "You gotta learn about options." And so I went from holding just Apple stock and Tesla stock. Those were the only 2 stocks I owned, and I owned like 20 grand worth. And I changed to like risky options and stuff. And so I just started going, "Oh, I made 50 grand this year. Oh, I lost 50 grand. Oh, I made this. Oh, I lost it." And so I started playing this stupid gambling game. But in just last year, I held January 2021 900 strike Tesla calls, 4 of them. And they would have been worth millions of dollars, and I remember thinking at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm going, there's no way this is going to recover. There's no way and I didn't know how the money printing was going to work. I didn't know how.
Rob, when did you figure out that we were going to do a V-shaped recovery? How quickly did it take you to figure out? What do you remember the day or the month or when it was like, oh, this is definitely bouncing back?
I just remember my friend calling me back. "I'm investing in Carnival, cruise ships." And I'm like, "You're investing in Carnival cruise ships at the bottom? What a moron. Why would you ever get in cruise liners in a pandemic? You're out of your mind, Matt." I remember you called me and I was talking, one of my clients was talking to me about this, and I'm just thinking, I remember being so stupid thinking and then turning around, a guy crushed it on so many different little random stocks that were bottoming out. But I think it took me to realize that I was wrong and they were making hundreds of % returns. And it was maybe 8 months later where I realized, oh wait, they can actually just print trillions out of thin air. And that's actually at the same time.
He should have bought call options on that. Speaking of calls, he probably would have really killed it.
And it killed me because I had sold I still made a few $100 grand or whatever on Tesla. I did all right on it, but it was like, if I had kept those calls, dude, I would have crushed it. I remember selling them in July of 2020. And I had the January 2021 900 strike calls pre-stock split. So it was like it's past 900 after the split now, so these would have been way in the money back then after the split. But I thought, I'm like, dude, I have a good business going. I'm now all of a sudden my revenues are up higher than ever before. This is a consistent thing. And I know if I keep it going with Mineral X, this is going to blow up. and I'm going to keep going with this. But the funny thing is the pain of missing out on making, would have made 3-4 million on this, holding those options. And I just remember just being in so much pain sitting, because I used to live in my warehouse back then. So it's like glamping, I guess, living in the warehouse, because I kind of set it up in a cool way. It's like a nice apartment. But at the time I was like going to Airbnbs, like on occasion. If I had a good month, I'd be like, all right, I'm renting this badass Airbnb for a week over there in downtown LA, and getting a skyscraper Airbnb, right? So I'd take all these pictures and act like I was living lavish or whatever, and like, but realistically,
I love that you say that. That's awesome.
Like it was true. It's like I used to live
Some
in a warehouse.
people do it. They don't say it. They don't admit it, but you're being honest, Like
Yeah,
I see
it was
all
like
these
little
YouTube stars and all this kind of crap, and it's like they're Instagram stars, and it's like they don't own these houses and shit,
Oh no, man, no. And it's just like, because I learned how to hack things when I was living out of my car. When I found out that I'm like, I got in this rare bullion game, and these coin shops around the country didn't know what rare bullion was, and so they were selling it for the melt value of the bars. So if it was silver was trading at this, they'd sell it for the silver value. But realistically, some of these bars were $1,000 bars that they were only selling me for $100 or whatever, And so I was just like, when I found out that they didn't know, I'm like, oh, cross country tour, let's go, baby. And so I just went every single pawn shop, every single coin shop, state to state to state, living in the back of a Prius. I just never forget those times. But it's like, I think I was even happier back then. It's funny. But I remember figuring out Airbnb. And I'm like, wait a minute.
You're always happier with less. It's weird. Yeah.
It's so weird. And you're chasing this happiness thing. And it's like, things are, I don't know. I'm pretty excited about what's going on now. But back then it was just like, you never knew what was coming in the future. It was just whatever, you're on that open road sort of thing. And it was just treasure hunting. And I remember just having these huge come ups on, like, going through, Vegas, and then all the way Utah, just going up and down the 15. Then I went over to Arizona, went up Wyoming, went over just everywhere, Idaho, all these different places I went just traveling around. And I figured out Airbnb. And so when I finally figured out, I could live in a warehouse and build up my cash flow, build up my nest egg, rather than just spending a bunch of money, I would live in the warehouse for a few months and then live lavish for a week and go to some fancy Airbnb. And so I was sitting in this fancy Airbnb just wondering what I was going to do with my life. And I had sold the Tesla stock too soon. I'm seeing Tesla starting to skyrocket. It was like July. I remember it was like June, July. I sold between that time, and then all of a sudden August, September, November, it started going just skyrocketing towards the end of the year. And I'm like, dude, I held the 2021 Januaries. What is wrong with me? I had made so much money. I had enough to sell 80. Like I was already up like I feel like I made 8x on it already. I could have just sold half, kept my original investment plus some, and just left the other half riding. That was my initial plan. But
I sold Tesla. I got Tesla at $90. I sold it around 850. Almost got a 10x on it. And the reason I sold Tesla, it wasn't that I didn't believe in the company. It's that Elon told me he didn't believe in the company, because he said, right? Think about it. He says, our price is it's overvalued.
It's too high.
And then he says, price is too high. And then he goes to the market, because he's like, he didn't believe that. So what does he do? He sells stock to the public at $5 billion. And instead of buying back the stock and terminating it, which is what people do in buybacks, when they raise capital on debt, they buy it back. He didn't raise capital on debt. He sold the equity. He created new shares, sold the shares from the company, and he took $1.5 billion of the $5 billion and he bought Bitcoin. So what is he telling and signaling to the market? Sell my fucking stock and buy Bitcoin, because that's what I'm doing. I said, okay, I'm selling it and I'm buying Bitcoin. Thank you for the tip. Thanks for the hat tip there.
Dude, it was so brilliant the way they hit it too. They did a secondary at the same time as they did a stock split. It was like the most ultimate hiding maneuver of all time, because the stock only went up. And it's like, you guys know he diluted the stock, right? But then
so like nobody figured it out.
He knocked out with that exact, what he did there is he not only hit it with a secondary and dropped the stock price, because we all know, people just look at unit bias these days and go, oh, wow, I can afford Tesla stock. I didn't know it was so cheap. I thought it was so expensive. They don't even look at a market cap. So he knew to take advantage of that.
I was like, this is getting crazy. The PE was all you had to look at. I was like, this is crazy,
But then he destroyed the bankruptcy theories. So because he had so much cash on the balance sheet now, he couldn't go bankrupt. So
fuck the shorts up. Yep.
It was just the ultimate.
It was a short squeeze. Yeah. It's totally crazy.
Perfect chess maneuver, man. But it just. But the thing is that.
But Bitcoin it was obvious. Like, so he bought Bitcoin with the capital, which I think was a signal to the market. He was like basically saying that Bitcoin is perhaps the most. It's really interesting. Bitcoin is perhaps, in my opinion, the most accessible asymmetric bet in the world. And when I say accessible, like most of the asymmetric bets are things that only accredited investors can get into. These are like high growth technology companies, and you have to be accredited to invest in these types of companies, right? And so anybody can buy Bitcoin. Like, you don't have to be accredited. So it's the first time in human history that I've ever seen that anybody can get into the best asymmetric bet available. It's similar to a call option, like we were talking about, where investors' downside is limited to 1 times their money. If you put in $100,000, the most you could lose is $100,000. But what we just said before is, at least in my opinion, I think Bitcoin could be $100 to $200 trillion market cap, which means you could lose 1 times the money you put in, but you might make 1 to 200 times your money on the upside. I mean, that's amazing. And the only, basically the only upside, the Bitcoin's only upside is really limited by, and I think I get this one from the guy who's the author of The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. Slipped my mind now. Do you remember who that is?
Wait, repeat that.
The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. Who was the author of that? Let me look that up. I'm slipping my mind here. I'm like, I should know that.
It sounds so
That
familiar.
is,
It bothers me what's in the back of my mind.
VJ. Yeah, VJ. So
Okay,
I'm thinking Victor. I'm like, that's not Victor. VJ, right? So I think he said something along the lines, if I'm not mistaken, that Bitcoin's upside is only limited by the desire of the people, right? So, but I kind of put a twist on this and I say it's limited by the desire of the global population to protect their wealth from the government's intervention by creating inflation, intentional inflation, by the way, we know, right? Which is essentially disrupting the entire money supply, debasing your buying power, which we talked about earlier, and thus requires people to just work longer, which really means the government is stealing your time. They're literally stealing time from people. There was a time in America where a family could have one person supporting the family. Now they say it's 2.3 people have to support a family. Well, where's the 0.3 coming from? It's a husband and a wife. What are you talking about? That means you're just accumulating debt and you're both working at full capacity. And then you'll have these entrepreneurs be like, well, you need to, like Gary Vaynerchuk, you got to work at night, and then, don't watch Lost. You should be working on a business at night. It's like, why do they have to do that? Like, why do people have to work around the clock? I did it, and that's why I got wealthy. And Gary did it. That's why I got wealthy. You're doing it. I understand that. But like, what if you don't want to do that? Like, is that what our quality of life should be? Is that we have to work all the time to accumulate wealth? I don't think it should be. I think it's ridiculous. And I think Bitcoin is basically a revolution by the people against the corrupt governments. And I don't think everybody fully gets that yet, but those that do, you can't unsee that. You can't unsee that the government is stealing our time by debasing our money, by intentionally inflating the dollar and intentionally inflating prices. And I brought Jeff Booth onto my show. You should have him on your show. He's a great guy. The Price of Tomorrow, the author of that. Everything is actually deflating, but we see prices going up, but it's not real. They're not really going up. They're just the price of their house. My house went up like significantly this year, right? At least on Zillow. I didn't try to sell it. Who the fuck knows what it really go for? But we have rental properties and they've gone up almost 100% in 2 years. It's unbelievable, right? No, they didn't go up. Like Hodl says it best. If every house in your neighborhood went up by 50%, did you make any money? Because if you sold your house, you got to go buy another house for the same price. You're not making any money, right? What they're really doing is the price of your house is just a reflection of the dollar losing its value. That's all it is. And and the government does this because they don't want people to realize what's really happening. But we are increasingly becoming aware of these things because we have the internet. Thank God for the internet. It democratizes information and flattens and levels the playing field. And over time, people will figure out what's going on because it is freely available on interviews like this, on podcasts, on books, blogs, etc. So it will just take a little bit longer, but it is inevitable that everybody will get it. And the revolution is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the revolution against the government's inflating and debasing us and stealing our time.
It almost seems like it's the all of the pain and the circumstances and things you've been through is what hones you in to understand and to grasp all of these concepts right now. When I was talking about that missing out on Tesla, what's funny is when I look back at it, it's like, yeah, I could have made all this money on that. But at the same time, the pain of it and being so mad at myself that I missed out on it, just like you were mad at yourself with the Universal situation. I remember going, you know what? And if you look back on my channel, I started my channel July 2020. Right after I had sold my Tesla stock too soon and right after it started skyrocketing, I'm like, you know what? I'm starting this YouTube channel. I've been wanting to do this YouTube thing for a long time. I'm doing it. I'm going to make that jump. And so like the pain of it is what honed me in to realize, this is what's going on. I want to get this information out there. I want to do these different things. So it's like looking at the negative and putting it in a positive light and trying to figure out how to navigate, even though it's so negative. And so with Bitcoin and what you're talking about, it's like the negative here is I think that people are working wages that are deflationary. If anything, they're either stagnant or deflationary, being paid in an inflationary currency, which is like literally entrapment. It's like the biggest modern crime on humanity because people don't even see it coming. And I wrote this.
They don't even know it. My father-in-law is a very, very educated educator himself, right? And so is my mother-in-law. So my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, both 40 years as teachers. He taught history. And VJ's book, The Bullish Case of Bitcoin, I gave him a book. First I said to him, I want you to read, I actually wanted him to read Jason Williams' book, which was Bitcoin, Hard Money You Can't Fuck With. Well, he's 75 years old. He's a conservative, not conservative politically, but conservative individual as you get older, right? He just don't think he can pull the trigger on buying a book that says The Bullish Case. You couldn't buy the book that says, Bitcoin, hard money you can't fuck with, right?
It's a great
So
title.
he's like,
Jason made a great title. You got to give him credit.
Listen,
The guy's a marketer.
Yes and no, right? No doubt it's a great title, except when he goes on TV, which he does a bunch, they won't put the name of the book up and they won't talk about it ever. Yeah. Like, it's crazy. They'll be like, author of a Bitcoin book. They won't say the name. He tells me this all the time. I'm like, that's unbelievable, right? But I wanted him to read that book because I actually think that that's probably the best book on Bitcoin is Jason Williams' book. I really believe that because he does give like the history of the money and he intertwines his personal stories and his understanding of Bitcoin and how he came to it through pomp and all this kind of stuff, right? Great book. I really encourage everybody to read it. But it's hard for people that are older to read a book that has the word fuck in the title, right? It's just, he lost the older crowd. Not that he's trying to win them over. I'm not saying that. But I would like my father-in-law to understand what sound money is. Like, Jesus Christ, you read a lot in your day and you've learned a lot, but yet you're not taking this seriously. And they believe that the Fed will just continue to keep fixing the problems, I guess, I don't know what they think. So I then drop shipped him The Bullish Case for Bitcoin from VJ because that book is a short read. It's like 110 pages. It's like a pamphlet, right? It started as like a blog post, I think, and then he made a book out of it, right? It's great. Like, gives the same thing of the history of the money and all this kind of stuff. It's very, 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 very clear and concise, Father-in-law reads the book, comes to my house for Thanksgiving, and I say to him, so what'd you think of the book? And he starts telling me what the book said. He's regurgitating. This is what teachers do, right? There's different types of intelligence in life, right? He has a high cognitive ability. He reads a book. He retains the information. He can regurgitate information. I'm like, well, what's your interpretation of that? Like, what did you derive from that? And he didn't have an answer. Like, I must have asked him like 5 different ways from Sunday, like trying to understand if he understood like that the government is. So I tell him what I think. They're stealing our time. This is about control. And he's like, whoa, sounds kind of nefarious. And I'm like, it is. Like, what do you think? This is an accident? Like, do we really think that, like, it's either they're accidentally doing it or it's intentional? But I can't imagine that these are the people running our government and they have advisors and all these people and nobody understands this. Like, there's a whole swath of people in the world, hundreds of millions of people that do believe this. And then there's billions of people that don't even think about it. And then there's a small handful of people in a smoky room in the government with a cigar and a glass of whiskey that are like controlling this shit, right? Like at the Fed and everything. Why are they doing what they're doing? You got to ask yourself, why are they doing this, right?
It's kind of, I've played into this, like I try to draw, there's so many theses that we can draw on how this plays out. Are they going to go to negative rates? Are they going to just start giving money away? Please take our money. Do it. Banks, please God, just take our money, whatever, or are they going to actually taper? Like they say, it's funny that all their projections, they always like put this little, you ever get an apology from somebody that's just a half-ass apology that just doesn't really make the market? They say the apology and then they bring this like but at the end of it. It's like that maybe or something. It's like, and so every time Powell's done speaking, he always goes, but if things got so bad, we'd obviously use the tools at our disposal to do blah, blah, blah. It's like, but dude, you've already used all your tools. And what I bring up, I made this video on stagflation recently, and it's actually Jeff Booth talking to guys like you, just talking to other Bitcoiners out there, made me kind of develop this thesis that we're kind of in stagflation and we don't notice it. People talk about inflation and deflation, but when I think about technology, we already were in a deflationary world based on technology.
Yeah.
Just the technology growth of these iPhones being in our pockets. Look at education. If you're paying $200,000 for a college education right now and you can't really afford it, it's like, why would you do that? You could just be on YouTube watching Jay Gould's videos and be learning all kinds of shit. And
I will tell you that this is not popular either. I tell people all the time, I think that it makes sense to send your kids to college still. And in the world we live in today, everybody says that I'm crazy for saying this, but it goes back to the whole story of to where I got to and how I got to where I got to, right? I'm not saying it was because of college, but I am saying that it was the relationships that I built in the tech space and the understanding and the knowledge that I accumulated from all those different relationships and the worldview that I had that allowed me to formulate my own opinion about the world, the hypothesis, and be able to build the things I did. I think college is important for that reason. Not every college is equal though, right? I want to be very clear about that. If you go to like an elite school, whether it's a Stanford or even an Ivy League school like a Harvard or something like that, or Emory, or these top, Pepperdine. These are great schools, right? Put Notre Dame in there, I'd say, but great schools, right? Where you can get a great base of a network of individuals that can help you start off your career maybe later in life. It's like a network, right? That part you can't get on a YouTube video. You just can't get it, right? You can't get personal relationships by reading it online. If that's the case, if everybody has an equal playing field of all the information, then what differentiates you from the crowd? Nothing, right? So there will be a place for elite schooling and the relationships and networks that it builds. And so that will always be the case, in my opinion. And the best will go to the best, if that makes sense.
I
I
can
don't think that's
respect
going to go
that.
away.
What I would argue is just that it should be less expensive. Because based on how much education is out there for free, or how much education, like I signed up for master classes for recently. I'm learning how to cook from Gordon Ramsay, and I'm watching these videos from Gordon Ramsay for like $180, and it's like, how much would it cost for me to go and do it, like him to do a seminar with 50 people in the room or whatever? It would have been way more expensive than this $180.
But let me ask you this, Rob. If you got to sit down with him and you learned with him directly, and then there was 5,000 people that took his class, who are they hiring? You or them? They're going to hire you.
Something to be said. Something to be said for
Right?
that.
So there's something there for in person and the relationship. And frankly, he might introduce you to your next job, right? Like there's just something there. Warren Buffett's a great example. There was no internet back then, but he read The Intelligent Investor, Benjamin Graham, and says, oh, he's a professor at Columbia. I'm going to Columbia. And he goes to Columbia to get the firsthand experience, relationship, and understanding directly. He could just read The Intelligent Investor and said, hey, got the information here. What do I need to meet this guy for? There's something to be said about meeting people in person.
Yeah. I think what it is I have this chip on my shoulder still from, I think I did 58 units at a JC, and I just never wanted to move forward with it. And like, I remember feeling like, cause I have the ADD thing, I'd be looking at the hillside, be like, wow, the view's probably pretty great up there, and I'd be like, well, in some trigonometry class and just staring off into the abyss. And I couldn't get focused. So I waited tables, and I found out that I could make a lot of money waiting tables. And so just waiting tables, I was making just ridiculous amounts of money, and it was all cash tips and stuff. So I was like, maybe I'll just keep doing this and figure something out. And then before I knew it, a collectibles dealer came in, and that's how I got into collectibles, was just this serendipitous event of that happening, which is just wild. But on that,
colleges aren't a free market. The problem is they're not a free market. The government is backstopping and guaranteeing the money to the schools, regardless if people pay it or not. And you can't bankrupt your college tuition. You just can't. It doesn't, like, you can't, like, say 7 years it wipes out. It doesn't go away. So that will stay on your credit for the rest of your life if you don't pay your college tuition. And everybody's well aware of that. And so that means you can never get a mortgage on a house, all this kind of stuff, right? So you're screwed. So, which is a shame, because these are 18-year-old kids signing up for these things and they don't know what the fuck they're doing, right? For that part, if they can fix that, I think you would have a free market and pricing would get back to normalization. I think it wouldn't outpace inflation. It just couldn't, because people would just default at some point. And the ones that don't have great education and don't provide a great service to people to be able to have a future, they're going to start defaulting on those loans, and those schools are going to go away, right? Like they're going to go bankrupt, and they don't
such a
have
great
that.
point.
That's the problem right now. It's really, it goes back to the politicians again. They'd have to fix that.
It's really such a great point, because it's like, I'm a libertarian to the core. I imagine that you're somewhere in the smaller government realm as well. And it's like, if you look at the government, it's like, why is college so expensive? Because the government made it that way. Like if I could show them millions in revenue and they would still give me a hard time about a $250,000 loan, just for me to get that. But if I'm an 18-year-old kid, they're going to be like, yeah, no problem. You go.
If you want to get that $250,000 loan to start a business and hire people, they're not going to give it to you. But you want to go to college? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, by the way, you can never bankrupt it. It's like, what?
That's what that to me is like this diabolical manipulative thing. Like there's a difference between being manipulative and like persuasive. I think a manipulative has this diabolical thing behind it, and that to me is the diabolical thing. Is there? It's like, okay, well, we're not teaching these kids prior to 18 financial literacy. We're not teaching them how to understand what credit is, how this all works, the difference between unsecured and secured debt, all these different things, and they don't realize that this is a secured debt on your life. This loan, it's like literally on you, and you can't even die out of it. You can't even, like, there's no way out of this loan.
Nope.
And the way it was designed like that is just, to me, it's like criminal. But I wanted to get your take on this point here, because I brought up like deflation in technology, and education was one of the first things on my mind. But like there's all kinds of things going through deflation because of technology right now, and it would have happened anyway. But then on top of it, because of the pandemic, there's so many people that are unemployed now, and all these companies that are learning how to use Zoom, learning how to use all these different products on hand, and being forced to use these products. And they realize, well, wait a minute, I could save a ton of money by my employees being outsourced and being at home and this and that. And so I'm seeing this double whammy of deflation based on technology that was already going to happen, and then deflation on jobs in addition to that, based on the current circumstances that the people don't even they're more efficient through Zoom and all these different things that they're using with the companies now. But then on top of it, we have extremely high inflation that is much higher than the 6.2% they're saying on the CPI data. And that number's already skewed
15.
anyway. Doesn't even include like gas and things that really matter to us, which is crazy to me that's the figure they go off of. But really, yeah, it's like 10, 15%. People don't know that their ice cube is literally losing 10 to 15% of its size every single year. And then that compounds. If it keeps up, people forget that it compounds year over year too.
Yeah,
so you're really,
dude,
it's like people are just totally screwed. And so you have that. You have high inflation, and the difference between stagflation and just regular inflation is when you have high inflation, well, the Fed can start the money printer and they can do all these different things, or high unemployment rather. The Fed can start the money printer and it creates inflation, and then all of a sudden there's the unemployment rate goes down. But right now, I think because of deflation in technology and deflation, because of the current situation, the pandemic, we're gonna have much higher unemployment than expected. And then we're also going to have high inflation, and that's literally the definition of stagflation. And we haven't gone through stagflation since like the 80s, And so for me, I'm wondering, in stagflation, that's a completely different world than anyone's used to, and they're just not. You have high unemployment, people not working, and then everything costs a ton of money through inflation at the same time. And I make the argument that it's kind of happening like right now. And I had asked Greg Foss this, and he goes, "Yeah, we're in stagflation right now." I'm like, do you guys, does that go over everybody's head? Like, do you guys, how big of a deal that is, stagflation? Like, you understand we're fucked if that happens, right? Like, this is going to be, you have and everybody with their stocks that are up a ton of money in the stock market, they don't realize that unit of measure gets decimated by stagflation. And people always say, oh, the dollar is the cleanest shirt in the dirty hamper. And this is like, well, what if they're all dirty and there was an option to clean the laundry? What if all these fiat currencies are dirty and that whole basket goes down? What if the dollar index is 96, it goes down to 56, but all the other ones are at 36? The whole basket crumbles at the same time. And then your stock that was $1,000, if it lost half the value and its underlying, it might say 1,000, but the hidden tax, the hidden thing that people
there has to be an asset. We know what it is, but there has to be an asset that will eventually be uncorrelated to that, right? And so you would think that if the government's going to do this, that they would at least you would think this, but you wouldn't think this, right? But you would hope, right, that they would say, by the way, this is what is happening, and we believe that the best chance for you to succeed and is to buy something like Bitcoin or something, right? They may not say Bitcoin, but you should be in assets, right? Last year during the pandemic and all this kind of stuff happening, I think it was either a politician or one of the Fed governor's son, they were asking him, there was like a documentary, I think Hoddle had me watch this documentary. It was really interesting. And they were talking about how they're printing all this money and stimulus and all this kind of stuff. Right. And they were saying that, all this is going to make the rich richer because they're going to buy assets. So you guys are basically, are you intending to is your intention to make the rich richer? And he's like, no, it's an unintended consequence. And he was very open and very transparent and like didn't argue that wouldn't happen. He's like, that's correct. Like it will cause inflation of assets, right? Because you can't put your money in cash assets because you'd lose money. He goes, but the poor, what is the poor? Like the people who don't have any money, what is their asset? Their asset is their job. That is the only asset they have, is to be able to go get more cash flow to pay their bills next month, right? That's it. So their only mandate is to make sure that there's no loss of jobs, even if that makes the wealthy extremely wealthy and pulling further and further away from the poor, because we have assets, we have cash and capital that we can put into assets that will benefit from this whole behavior, to the point that you're making. So it's really a shame, right, that this is all happening. But if you buy into assets, those assets will rise when they do these types of things. But the thing to buy into over the long term is it's clearly going to be Bitcoin, right? Because that will be the thing over time that will become. It's not uncorrelated really right now. Like we saw last year, it will drop if the market crashes. It'll drop, but it will be the thing that survives in the end because of the one attribute that matters more than anything in it, which is the scarcity. They can't fuck with that, which is the title of Jason's book, right? You can't fuck with it. So since you can't, that's really where you should have your money. Everything else, including a stock, they could just create more shares like Elon and then sell it to the public. Like that's inflationary too, right? Like the entire stock market is inflationary. I remember last year when all these IPOs were starting to happen again for tech companies. Open Door happened this year, and Kramer's on like Mad Money, and he's like, the market's not gonna be able to support this at a certain point. Man, was he wrong, right? Like it made sense. He's like, there's only so much money to go around. except they keep printing more of it, Jim. Right? There's more money being printed constantly, which will flow into these assets. So you can keep bringing more companies public, having more shares available, and the market cap of the overall stock market will just keep inflating up because the cash will keep flowing into the market for that, you know?
And what you brought up earlier, Jay, was the theft of time, and I think that that's such a big, and that actually like makes it real for the working class when you hear that hey, they're stealing your time, guy. You know,
Yeah.
like this is what they're doing. They're
You're
going
a
to be
slave.
and so if you're on salary, you're working maybe 60 hours a week, right? And so then you go, okay, well, let's calculate that per month. So you're giving up 200 to 240 hours of your time per month. What could you learn? They say it takes 1,000 hours to learn something. So in 4 months, you could have learned a whole new skill and been a pro at it. It takes 1,000 hours to be a pro at something and really understand it. And then 10,000 hours, you're like an expert at it.
Mm-hmm.
So realistically, when I looked at it, that number, I forget where I read that saying of 1,000 and 10,000 hours. Like 1,000 makes you really smart at it.
Malcolm
10,000.
Gladwell. Yeah.
Yep, that was it. And so I just remember thinking to myself, like, well, wait a minute. If I take 4 months of my time, if I have 4 months of my time, I can learn a new skill. And to me, it was e-commerce. It was learning how to sell stuff on Instagram and Facebook and social media and all that stuff. And now that skill, like you could drop me in a desert and I'd have an iPhone in my pocket and I would find a way to make money real quick because I just understand it. And I took those 4 months to learn that. But getting back to the time thing, if you're giving up 240 hours of your life every single month and you're being paid in an instrument that you can't trust and it's diluted, that is essentially stealing your time. You're getting, and you could calculate it in a way where, well, what did you do? Well, you traded 240 hours of your time for $5,000 a month. Now you have that $5,000. You said that 240 hours of my living, my breathing, my life here on earth, that is a limited thing that I have. Or I would say the most important thing that we have as humans is our time. I
Yeah.
gave up that incredibly important thing to me for $5,000 that is melting away, and they're stealing it from me year over year over year. And I have to go, and my boss isn't coming to me and going, hey, they inflated the monetary supply by like 40%. We should probably increase your wages by 40%, right? If you're making
No.
$5,000, we should be giving you 7, 8. You think, are they going to be doing that, Jay? Like, I mean,
Not at all.
and that's the scary part. And so when you brought up the time point, I think that really hits it home for people to understand.
It does if they can grasp this, right? Like the problem with Bitcoin, I always say to people, is that it's not something that I can tell you in 10 words or less. It's a realization that comes over a period of time of understanding a variety of different things. And it really starts with understanding money, the history of money, and that Bitcoin is money. A lot of people don't see it as money because they think money is the paper, that the currency, but that's not money, right? That's a credit. It's not money. So what is money? Gold's money, right? That's a scarce asset. It's not as good as Bitcoin, but it's good money. It's just not the perfect money, right? The perfect money is Bitcoin. But there's nothing wrong with gold as a store of value per se. It's just that it doesn't meet all the different characteristics that we deem to be the best store of value. But I think in the bullish case for Bitcoin, he has like a chart, which is an amazing chart. Actually, talks about the different attributes. I don't know if I could share my screen on here or not, but I could pull it up if I could. But yeah, it's really cool. So he talks about like durable, portable, fungible, verifiable, divisible, scarce, established history, censorship resistance. The only thing that Bitcoin kind of fails on is established history. I mean, it's increasingly getting there. This is like the Lindy effect, right? The longer that, if I'm getting that correctly, I think it's like the longer that something is around, the more probable that it will remain to be around. So like when I got into social networks and building social networks in like 2003, 2004, it was like everybody was like, "Oh, that's a fad," and I'm like, "No, it's not a fad. It's not going anywhere," you know. And now here we are, almost 20 years later. By 2022, we're running around the corner. We're like 18 years, later, and I don't think anybody believes that social networks are going to go away anymore, right? Like, I think it's a widely accepted view that this is part of our life forever now, that we will always communicate online in some way through communications of some kind of social networks, right? Whether or not Facebook is here in 50 years, that's a different story. I don't know. I don't really care. But there will be some other communication device in which we communicate and we have a social graph of some sort, right? And I think it will probably be Facebook, but we'll see. It's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's going on 13 years next year in January. And when it gets to 20 years, I think once you hit 20 years on anything, it becomes pretty likely that you don't think it's going anywhere, right? No matter what it is. Cell phones, really started in the 1980s. By the 90s, we got the Nokia in the late 90s, with the snake and everything like that. And it was like, it wasn't so clear. When the iPhone came out, that was a game changer. It was like a 0 to 1 moment. And I think it became very clear to people, like, this is now a computer in my pocket. It's not just a communication device for talking. It's everything. It's got your calculator, your photos, your videos. It's like, it's unbelievable. And it just gets better and better, incrementally better. It's not like there's like a lot of people say, oh, the new iPhone 13 Pro Max comes out. It's not that interesting. It's not that much different. Well, you know what? There's some pretty cool features on here. Like I take a video of my kid and it's got the like cinematic view, and it's like, it does the bokeh where it's like blurry in the background. And I mean, that type of camera like 20 years ago it's a certain lens that was this big in a bag, and like it's all on your phone now. It's incredible, right? The innovation that we've had. And so like this is the thing. Like over time, you start to realize this isn't going anywhere, you know. And I think that's the case. So the problem with Bitcoin, like I always say to people, is that it's going to take you time to figure it out. You'll pay the price that you deserve, right? When you figure it out. Unfortunately, I did too, and I'm sure you did too, right? I was introduced to Bitcoin much earlier, like I learned about it earlier, but didn't fully understand it, you know?
Who got you to fully understand it? Like, when did it click? What was the thing that was like, oh, I get it now?
I don't know who did. It was a confluence of things over time. I will say this year, I gained a lot of conviction in Bitcoin. Once I went on the app, Clubhouse app, and got to meet guys like Hodl, Jimmy Song, speaking to people like Andreas Antonopoulos, Max Kaiser, Jason Williams, became friends with him. It's like amazing with these guys because they got to that realization earlier than I did. I was in it for a while, but I was in it like I was in stocks. To me, it was a trade. It was like, oh, it's doing well. I'll buy more. It's going up. Oh, cool. You know, but I never viewed it as something that will be here forever. And that it's like, you know, Michael Saylor says, it's going up forever, Laura. Forever. You know, it's like,
dude, he's right. So cold. Guy's a savage.
He's right. I mean, it's so true, but it's like, he's been great for Bitcoin, by the way, for people to understand Bitcoin. If anybody wants to learn about Bitcoin, go watch the Ross Stevens, Michael Saylor interview earlier this year. I think it was like January, February, March. I can't remember. It was earlier in this year. The 9-dig event, I think it was. And it was just amazing, like the way he being Ross spoke about it. Really Ross. It was like, I think Michael interviewing him essentially, right? And he was so clear and concise, and the way he talked about the Lightning Network, and like I didn't fully understand the Lightning Network at the time. I wasn't really paying attention, and I was like, oh my God, like that is a thing that is like legitimately going to transform trade internationally. Like that's unbelievable, right? Like the wire transfer, right? That I was telling you about, from like, done. Would have got it in 10 seconds, right? Done. Not maybe 10 minutes, but it would have been done, right? Confirmed, like your point, you would have seen it immediately, right? Wire transfers, like, you know, there's intermediaries, it clears within so many hours or days, you know, it's unbelievable. Like you can't do it on a weekend or a night or holidays. I mean, what are we doing here? Like we have a digital world. Like it instantly sent that. There's no reason why we couldn't have been doing that already. And you were already doing those types of things with things like Venmo and PayPal and stuff like that. But it was still counterparty risk and stuff. You know what I mean? And reversible too. Like those transactions can be reversed. They can freeze your accounts. There's all kinds of things, right? Because it's not censorship resistant, obviously. But yeah, like people, you know, I would tell people, watch, if you want to learn about Bitcoin and really understand it, watch a lot of interviews with Michael Saylor. I think he's probably the best. He's the best in the business, in my opinion. I really believe that. Probably the smartest individual intellectually in how he can describe things. And listen, I got a lot of respect for Max Kaiser and stuff, but he's a little inflammatory at times. That's his personality, is to be like a little crazy, you know? And Michael, he comes with some credibility, accomplished entrepreneur. I think he's the longest standing CEO of a technology company that's a public company, which is amazing. It's like 20 plus some years. You know, now you have like Jeff and others that step down. Like he is the longest standing CEO out there. He's just a really credible source of information. And he speaks very clearly to people. There are a lot of other people that are great. I'm not taking anything away from everybody else. It's just how he has his talking points that are just so concise, right? He doesn't drag it on. It's like boom, and it's like wow, makes you think. You're like, well, that's interesting. You start Googling shit he says. You're like, what the fuck, you know? You're like, so I always point people to Michael Saylor's interviews, and more recently, I've been pointing people to the Bullish Case for Bitcoin because I think it's a short read and it's concise and it gives you the history of money. So that really gets people there.
That really helps for people that are at zero Bitcoin right now, that have none. And I try to, I'm trying to do is make, you know, people from precious metals and collectibles, because I mean, Rolexes have done really well. You know, people think like, you wear a gaudy Rolex. Like, no, it's gone up. It's made like 50%. It's gone up quite a bit. You know, that thing just keeps making me money. The more I get to flex it, it just makes me more money. So why would I be mad about this thing? But like the collectibles guys, like they're doing okay. But they're looking at Bitcoin as like, oh, this is digital funny money. I don't know it. But they don't understand custody of Bitcoin. They don't understand the way it
You know what you
works.
got to ask them, Rob? Say, what are you afraid of? Because there's only two true emotions in the world. There's love and fear. So you don't love Bitcoin, clearly, because you're not in it. So what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of losing all of your money? Like if you put in 1% of your net worth and you lost all of it, would that materially change your life in some way? They would have to say no. But if I told you that that 1% could become 99.99% of your net worth, why wouldn't you take that bet? What am I missing? Because your net worth is going to go up and down by 2-3% every day anyway, just the volatility of your assets, right? So like, so what's the problem here? I just don't understand. So when I was competing with YouTube and they beat us, and then they sold to Google, they sold for $1.65 billion, right? And we were the number 2 site for that. And so UBS asked us to come on to a call with their investor base, right? And there was all these different investors and stuff that were on there, analysts and stuff, right? And they were asking me and my co-founder, Aaron, they're asking us questions, right? So they're asking us why we think this is a good bet and why they didn't think it was. So why would they be wrong, right? And I said to them what we said earlier. I said, essentially what Google just did is they bought a call option. They spent 1% of the market cap of Google at that time, which was $165 billion. Today, Google's what, 1.4 billion or 1.4 trillion or something like that, right? I would have never guessed that would have happened 15 years later. But what my thinking was, I said, guys, it's a call option, and it's costing them 1% of the company in stock, right, to buy them for $1.65 billion. If they're right, the television advertising industry is $80 billion. How much of that will be sucked into YouTube over the next 10 or 20 years, right? Is it zero? Because you're saying it's zero, right? I don't think it's zero, right? When you go on the internet, do you ever use YouTube? And it's not like it was today with the phone and all that kind of stuff back then. It's just pre-iPhone, 2006, right? But people were using it a lot, right? And increasingly more every month. And they cited things like the cost of storage and the cost of bandwidth. And I said, okay, so when we look at like Moore's law and you look at the cost of technology over time, it drives downward, not upwards. So we know that whatever their costs are today, they will be less in 5, 10, 20, and 25 years. We know that, right? So the costs will go down and the advertising will likely go up, right? And the usage will likely go up. The adoption of broadband we saw a rise with Forrester Research and all these, that the usage was going up. The adoption of broadband was going up, which you clearly need for video, right? So you have broadband going up, you have users are going up, and ad dollars are going to migrate. Why would you not buy that call option for 1% of your company? It was the best decision. It was probably the best acquisition in the history of all acquisitions, actually. They bought it for $1.65 billion, and it's estimated to be between $500 to $700 billion today, right? Which they will probably spin it all.
I appreciate that about you, Jay, because you just broke down. Greg Fawcett said a similar thing. You broke down it in a real world scenario there for from your expertise of these large companies, how they look at a risk mitigation, and from your expertise as an angel investor, that 90% of them might fail, but those 10% are going to make you hundreds and hundreds of percent returns, maybe thousands of percent returns. So you take that skill and you bring it out there and you let people understand it in a real way. So I respect that a lot about you, Jay.
People should do this, and they should do this with their own net worth, right? You should have a call option with Bitcoin. That's all it is. Just look at it that way. I think Greg calls it a fire insurance, right? I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's like, your house is burning down. Why don't you have insurance on your house? What are you, out of your freaking mind? We could literally see the flames boiling. It's burning down right before your eyes, your house. You don't have insurance on your home. You're a fucking idiot.
Right? He's a cool cat. He's a cool cat.
This is how Greg would say it, right?
What I loved about him is he said, you're just a terrible risk manager. Like we brought up Peter Schiff in our interview. I talked about Peter Schiff with him, and he goes, "Oh yeah, just tell me he's a terrible risk manager." If he had been a good risk manager, he would have just put 5% in there and been the best gold fund in the entire country, And
if he was wrong, it didn't matter. It doesn't matter. You losing 1 to 5% doesn't make a difference, because your growth on everything, when you're in the right assets, your growth is like 10% plus, right? So it just screws up 1 year of growth. That's all it is. 1 year. It's not going to be the end of the world, right? And by the way, you don't have to put all 5% in at once. You can put 1% this year, over the next 5 years. You slowly put it in. And, dollar cost averaging essentially, right? So you dollar cost average yourself in case you bought it all in a lump sum. Historically speaking, lump sums outperform 95% over dollar cost averaging. But the reason why you would do dollar cost averaging is because you are your own worst enemy to invest in investing, right? You and me, right? We are our own worst enemies because it's emotions that screw you up, right? It's temperament. It's investors' temperament, right? That makes an investor good or bad. Like Warren Buffett, it's like he has no fucking emotion, right? That's why he's the best investor. He does not trade. He invests. He does not unwind investments rapidly because he doesn't like what happened on a headline. That's just not what they do. He did buy, as you probably know, because you're in gold and precious metals, he did buy Barrick Gold last year, which was a shock, I think, to everybody because he really just thinks that it's a greater fool theory. But that's a Bitcoin mining company. I'm sorry, it's a gold mining company, right? So he bought that because it was a cash flow thing. He loves cash flow, right? So it's like, and as the price goes up, they make a higher percentage than the actual gold, as you know, right? So like, and then he realized something isn't right here. This should have been moving. Gold should have been moving, but it's not moving. And what he's never come out to tell us was why it's not moving. But we know why it's not moving because they're not buying gold. People are buying Bitcoin now. That's what's happening, right? The folks that would have are unwinding positions to liquidate, to go into crypto, right? They're buying Bitcoin. That's what's happening.
There's a few big things with gold that I've realized. And it's like the first one was, and I'm big on utility precious metals, so I like to have silver, platinum, palladium. People don't, it's funny, like you hear Peter Schiff talking about gold all the time, but it's like, do you guys know that palladium's been in a 6-year deficit? 6 years of deficit. Like they don't have enough palladium to meet the demand because they're using it in all different types of new fuel cell energies and stuff like that. And it's like, well, if people aren't talking about uranium, they're not talking about, rhodium. They're not talking, look at rhodium. Rhodium's chart's ridiculous. Palladium has done really well as well over the last 5 years, went from a few hundred bucks to like 2,000. Like these are, nobody talks about the palladium that went from $300 to almost 2,000 for palladium and actually almost tapped like 3K not too long ago. But it's like, but they're talking about gold. And I'm going, well, gold is sitting at a 12 trillion cap. But here's the thing that most people don't understand about gold is, if you went to the top bullion dealers in the country, if I made a phone call and talked to some of my buddies in the country right now that are moving millions and millions and even billions in gold right now, those guys would go, if you said, hey, bud, did you know that they just released it today that actually China had a lot more gold than you thought? And so did Russia, so did, England, and actually there's 20 trillion. They said 12 trillion to you, right? 11 trillion? No, it's actually 20 trillion. Not a single, I would argue nobody would be surprised by that. Nobody would be surprised that it was double the price figure that we're told.
Exactly. And the problem is that, like, even if they told you that, how do you verify it? It's not verifiable, right? So like Bitcoin is an open ledger. We know exactly how much Bitcoin is being mined every day. We know how much Bitcoin is out. The only thing we don't know is how much has been lost forever. That just means it's a better scenario, whatever that is. It's never a worse scenario. Not gonna be like, oh, by the way, there was an extra 10 million Bitcoin mined. We didn't realize. Like that can't happen, right? Whereas with gold, they could just be like, oh, wow, in Fort Knox, they had like 3 times the amount of gold than we actually thought they did. If there was ever an audit, like who's auditing Fort Knox, which means we don't know how much is actually there, which is insane, right? So like, why would you buy an asset that you have no idea what the amount of supply is in the asset when the asset is based off of supply and demand? It doesn't make any sense.
Just that,
but
point,
I have to
Jay,
hop in. I have a 1 p.m. Eastern time, so I got to hop in 5 minutes. I just wanted to give you a heads up.
Right on. I appreciate you spending so much time with me, man. And but on that point, it's like just that one point of the unit of account. The auditing and the unit of account, how much better of a unit of account it is, and auditing of this unit of account is enough for me to go, okay, if you don't have, a 1 to 5% allocation, not financial advice, we have to say that on you, not financial advice. Everything we talk about is just our opinions, disclaimer. But it's like it's foolish to not have it as the first person that got me to get into Bitcoin was actually Chamath. I always pronounce his name wrong, but it's funny that he's your friend. Chamath. Okay.
We're not friends, but he was at the Mayfield Fund when they were an investor. So I spent a lot of time with him in conference rooms and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, we haven't talked in years. Yeah.
Well, he had been on CNBC back when Bitcoin was like way less than it is right now. And he goes, this is
really
a schmuck insurance. This is schmuck insurance, guys. If you guys don't have insurance, then you're just, look, I put 5% or put 1%, and you put it exactly how you talked about it right there. And it's like, that's what I argue. And the ironic part is I'm living proof of it because I made those videos. When I learned about the unit of account, and the thing that blew my mind was using my own device and seeing the soft confirmation coming through and seeing that I go, wait, this is tangible. Only I have the passwords to this. I don't have to go to a wire transfer. I immediately went, this is a better wire transfer. The first time I saw that, it clicked with me, and I went, I'm going to make videos saying Peter Schiff is wrong about this. And I said, like, this was about a year ago, and I made a title saying Peter Schiff is wrong about Bitcoin, like literally, like just the whole title. And I was like,
I have a belief that Peter Schiff owns Bitcoin.
me
I
too,
believe he
yeah.
owns it. There's no question in my mind. The other day, him and his son were going back and forth, and I just wrote, "This is embarrassing." That's all I wrote. This exchange is embarrassing, I think I said, because it's like, there's no way. Why are you on Twitter hashtagging Bitcoin 20 times a day if you're a gold bug and your son's in Bitcoin, he's 100% in Bitcoin, and you literally own no Bitcoin? You're grifting. Give me a break. You're a grifter, right? That's all he's doing. So he's looking for the attention. He's trying to, like, double down with his audience and constituency that buys gold from his businesses, that, like, yeah, it's Bitcoin shit, but there's no fucking way he's that bad of a risk manager. I don't buy that one bit. I think he's too smart for that, but it doesn't fit the narrative. So he has to stick to it.
Well, it's getting under his skin, because at the time I had like 1,000. This is like a year ago, so I had like 1,000 subscribers, maybe a couple thousand views, and he finds that video and he goes, and you see at the top of my Twitter profile, I put it as the banner. Like, I hope you, at the end, I hope your channel is better than Bitcoin. Bitcoin was like 10, 15,000 at the time, and so I'm living proof when you talk about the 5-10% strategy. I put about 10% in at that point.
Rob, his problem is when you look at the list of attributes for Bitcoin that are good, like durable, portable, fungible, verifiable, divisible, scarcity, all these things, right? He's stuck on established history, 5,000 years established history. But Michael Saylor has a great line, which is, 5,000 years ago, we used to take a ship across the ocean in a wooden ship. Do we still do that? Right? You used to take a horse and buggy down the road. Do you still do that? Like, just because something has been established over a long period of time doesn't mean that it has to remain that way moving forward. What is gold? Gold is a money, right? What is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a money. What is a better money out of the two monies? It is clearly Bitcoin. And he just can't see it because it's been around for 12 years. And he's like, it's going to go to zero. It's like, this is the guy. I put up a video a few weeks ago, which was Katie Couric and the people on the Today Show back in the 90s, when they're literally sitting there, like relaxed, sitting back like this, and they're like, what is this internet thing anyway? Like, I swear to God. And then he goes, these email things. He has his legs crossed, all pretentious. And he's like, what is this A thing? Is that what I think they say it's at? Oh, at. Okay. I thought it was, okay. Yeah. So at, that makes sense. So NBC at .com? Is it com or com? Like, I'm like, you guys got to live with that forever. Guess what, Peter Schiff? You're going to have to live with that forever too, right? And I think he's happy to live with it because he likes the popularity, the fame of it. Like, he doesn't care that, because like, he got to stand for something, and he's not going to be like, if he's pro Bitcoin, no one's going to be like, oh, that's our Bitcoin guy now, put him out in the front. No, not at all, right? So he's going to continue to live and die on that hill because he at least is relevant for it. It's just what it is, dude.
Well, what I love about the way you put this, Jay, is you actually, like, you're not one of the insane types. I don't want to call them insane because maybe they're rational, maybe they're right. They say go all in Bitcoin or you're a fool. This and that. It's like, I got a company I'm running. But
they're probably right.
They might be right. They might be right, but at the same time, you can't come if you're trying to like make somebody.
I don't
take
even
that
think
first
it's like
leap.
Rob, I don't even think they might be right. I know they're right. It's just the timing. It's an exercise over time. And so when you don't have any money and you buy a 0.2 Bitcoin with all that you've saved, yeah, they're going to ride that out. When you have a lot of money, what's going to perform better over a certain period of time in like the next 5 or 10 or 20 years? The longer you go out, they're right. That part is, I think that's 100% correct. That if you go out 10, 20 or 30 years, I think they're right. But in a 5-year window, we don't know what the cycles will look like. We have no idea what will happen. We don't know if the Fed will actually get like ludicrous and like raise interest rates and crash everything, in which case everything will drop, including Bitcoin, stocks, commodities, everything, real estate, right? But if you have certain assets that are providing cash flow as well, you can survive through those crashes, right? So, but that's just the Bitcoin maximalist crowd. And I love those guys, but like it's a little radical in some ways, right? And I think it's because that's their play. That's their bet. That's their fucking Yashi, right? So good for them. I hope it works out in the time frame that they want it to. It will work out in the long run. They are right over the long term.
Yeah. I hate to like, I don't like to bash on gold because, at the end of the day, I have a lot of friends and fans that are gold and are in gold. And it's like, I think that's going to be a slow horse in the race where just kind of, if gold goes to 3,000, Bitcoin might be $250,000. And it's like, well, did it make sense to have a Bitcoin position and your gold position? Maybe it made sense to get a little bit of Bitcoin. So the way you phrase it of just, well, what do you have to risk at 1%? What are you going to lose at 1%? That's going to change your life. Like, no, it's like if it's just terrible risk management to have none in your portfolio, and time has proven
Terrible.
that. And so for me, I'm living proof that a 10% position came to be over 50% just based on the gains on it. So my insurance play worked out pretty well, and I still haven't sold any of it. And so it's like that's, to me, it's like I'm living proof of what you're talking about, Jay. You know, but I've taken a lot of your time, and I really appreciate you spending so much time here. But guys, if Jay has nothing to sell you, I have nothing to sell you. If you look at the description, there's no affiliate link down there. There's no website to click on. There's no Patreon to sell you. All that I'm saying is he spent a lot of time with us here. He's given a lot of information, a lot of alpha to help you guys navigate, whether it's building your own business, all these different things. So please do go in that description and subscribe to his channel. He's got a channel here on YouTube and runs a podcast that's just killer with great guests, and I think you should really check that out. Jay, is there anything that you're working on like at this exact moment right now that you'd like to kind of shout out or talk about, maybe in the internet space or anything like that?
I'm an angel investor, so people want to hit me up with a great idea. If you have traction, a differentiated idea that's scaling, I'm always interested in looking at that. I like to support entrepreneurs. Like I said, Reid Hoffman and Raj and all those guys supported me, and it's reciprocity. I give back. I treat it as an investment, so I look at it as any other investment as well. So it's not a donation, but I do invest, and particularly been focused on investing in Bitcoin companies more recently as well. But that's the only thing I can share with you right now. But yeah.
Right on. Well, again, Jay, thank you so much for spending this much time. I get so lost in these conversations. I'm sorry so much time went by, but it's great talking with you, man.
I had a good time. No, I appreciate you bringing me on. Thank you.
Right on. Well, have a great rest of your day, and everybody watching, make sure to go check out Jay again, and I will see you at the next video.